bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Ah, yeah. All right. Getting settled in. What's up? Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Tuesday, March 8th. 67 days into the new year. 297 days left. We are live from the bunker right here in downtown Burbank, California. I'd like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. It's Fade to Black. For KJCR and the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet, I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? Let's do this. Tonight we have very special guest Nick Redfern and his world of whatever. Yeah. Tomorrow night, Don Schmidt and Tom Carey are going to join us. Their new book is out called Children of Roswell. Thursday night, Jeff Harmon is going to be here. We're going to talk about Nancy Reagan and astrology and take your phone calls all night long because Thursday night is Fader night. You know the drill. All right, today is International Women's Day. So we're, all of us men need to salute, look around you, and appreciate the woman that is right next to you right now. Today is International Women's Day. All right. Please check out our newest sponsor, Life Change Tea, because right now it is cold and flu season. You need to take care of business. Get the tea. GetTheTea.com. You need to get the tea. That's why it's called GetTheTea.com. You need to get the tea. Get the super strength. Get it going. You will never, ever, well, no, I can't really dispense medical advice like that and say you'll never get sick again, but you probably won't. Because you are so polluted. I just watched Scarface the other day. Rita and I were glued to it. Her insides are so polluted. Tony, I told you, Tony. Sosa down in Bolivia. Amazing. That was actually shot in Santa Barbara. Where am I? GetTheTea.com. Just mention Jimmy when you order. That's all you need to do. Get yourself some free shipping. Get the tea. All of the products. I do the colostrum. I do the moringa. What else did I take today? I took Eighth Element, and I also took Full Spectrum Element. That's what I did today, and I feel great. There you go. Do it. GetTheTea.com. Help yourself. Help the show. GetTheTea.com. All right, where am I? The New Living Expo coming up April 29th through May 1st in San Mateo, California, San Francisco. Stephen Greer, Nassim Haramein, Greg Braden, Scott Wolter, Catherine Woodward Thomas, Dr. Eben Alexander, and Karen Newell. You got to check it out. It's one of the biggest conferences in the country, but they have got an amazing Mike Barra. They've got an amazing speaker lineup there. So go and check it out. I was going to mention a bunch of other. The list is really long. It's a great event. And it's not that expensive either. I mean, full passes are pretty reasonable. So, New Living Expo, we will be there. I'm going to MC the main hall for 2 or 3 days. So, just come and hang out with us. Rita's going to be there, and it's going to be a good time, all right? And rumor has it, by the way, that Skater Lisa is going to be there. I'm just saying, that's just what I heard. Maybe Dino. Will Dino actually drive to San Mateo? Maybe. Contacting the Desert comes up right after that, June 3rd through the 6th. Joshua Tree, Graham Hancock, Robert Bivall, Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Wilcock, Eric Von Daniken, George Norrie, Jim Mars, David Hatcher Childress, Danny Sheehan, and 50 other speakers are going to be there. Great event, soon to be the biggest one out there. And we have a winner. We have a winner for tonight's show. Won a full pass to Contacting the Desert. Gustavo Venechia from Cusco, Peru. Yeah, you are going to Contacting the Desert. And I can't wait to meet that guy, Gustavo Venechia, Cusco, Peru. I wonder if he knows, that's Brian Forrester lives in Cusco, doesn't he? I think so. That's interesting. Can't be that big of a town, right? Then the Roswell Festival right after that, June 30th to July 3rd. Speakers include there at Roswell, Travis Walton, Don Schmidt, Tom Carey. They're going to be with us tomorrow night, by the way. Peter Robbins, Alejandro is going to be there. Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, is going to be there. Stanton Friedman. I think Kathleen Martin's going to be there. Larry Holcomb is going to be there. Looking forward to that. And Thomas Reed. I just coughed. Came out of nowhere. That's what I get for drinking coffee like that. UFOs Within Reach comes up August 19th through the 21st, Big Bear, California. Speakers this time around in Big Bear, George Norrie, Jason Martell, Nick Redfern with us tonight, Stanton Friedman, Kathleen Martin, Mike Barra, Steve Murillo, Yvonne Smith, and Brian Forrester, oddly enough. Wow, that's kind of weird. That's called synchronicity. It's kind of weird right there. It's a pretty great lineup for Big Bear, too, as well. So 4 great festivals right in a row, 4 great conferences right in a row. We're broadcasting at like 1, 2, 3 of them. Come and hang out. Fade to Black live. 3 great conferences. Everything is over at jimmychurchradio.com. Now, we had some issues with the website yesterday. That's because we're working on a new one. And hopefully, I'm gonna leak this right now. Rita's gonna go, Jimmy, chill out. But I think we'll have it up by the weekend, and it's looking pretty dang snazzy, if I don't say so myself. All right, now let me get rid of this little thing in my throat. Man, love my Walter Lewis question everything mug. Let's get this show cracking. Why? Because today, the one and only Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees is 71. Gary Newman today is 58. Gary Newman did that song Cars. Do you remember that? Remember that song Cars? Early 80s, early MTV? Cars. Electronic music at its finest. Gary Newman, 58 years old. He's got a really great what do I want to say? A very interesting life that he has led. It's not what you think at all. All right? You should check it out. And one day, I'll tell you a little bit more about Gary Newman. Very interesting guy. Now, our dead guy's birthday today, Alan Hale Jr., 1921 to 1990, died at the age of 68. Yes, I'm talking about the skipper on Gilligan's Island. Show ran from 1964 to 1967. Hale died on January 2nd, 1990, of thymus cancer at St. Vincent Medical Center right here in Los Angeles, California, at the age of 68. His ashes were sprinkled into the Pacific Ocean. For his contribution to television, Hale has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and it's located at 6653 Hollywood Boulevard. All right, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, YouTube. You know what to do. Everything's Fade to Black, blah, blah, blah. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Go click on those little icons. Go follow, like, and subscribe. Any questions or comments during the show tonight or for myself, or for the one and only Nick Redfern, just use hashtag F2BQ. Nick Redfern is our guest tonight, and it will be Nick Redfern's World of Whatever live. Tomorrow night, Don Schmidt and Tom Carey are with us. They do have a new book out. It is called Children of Roswell. Thursday, Jeff Harmon, Nancy Reagan, who just passed away, she was big into astrology. And what does all of that mean? And did astrology plot the course of the White House and international and national issues? Were they, well, we'll talk to Jeff about that Thursday night, and we'll see if the rumors are true. Tonight, if you get through 323-825-5045 with the phones tonight, we'll maybe take some calls a little bit later on with Mr. Redfern. On this day in history, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanishes with more than 200 people aboard. More on that in just a bit. Fader fact, President Roosevelt collapsed while being painted. Yeah, a portrait. He never regained consciousness before dying. That unfinished painting captures his last waking moment. And that is a Fader fact. So, yes, it was. It was 2 years ago today. MH370 disappeared. And with that, we were presented with one of the great aviation mysteries and conspiracies in modern history, if not all time. And we watched it happen. We watched it unfold. I went back today and reviewed the facts. And the more that I look at the case, the more it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. It just doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. And I went and listened to the cockpit recording, if you remember, Good Night, and the famous left-hand turn, and the radar path that it took, and then the switching off of the transponders and everything else that happened, and suddenly it disappears off radar and heads south and disappears. Well, the more that I look, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. Whether it was the pilots or terrorists or UFOs, Pakistan, I don't know. But the plane disappeared. 2 years later, we still have this mystery, this conspiracy right in front of us. And it just makes you repeat my mantra, which is things are never what they seem. Ever. Ever. Now, I look at the world today. I just look around and I trip out. Things are never what they seem. They just are not. Nothing. Today, Iran fired off a ballistic missile, probably capable of carrying some really nasty warhead. And it's just after a few months after the deal was reached, giving them over $100 billion and opening up their country back into international trade, welcoming Iran back to the world. Come on, get back in the car, right? And what did they say today? They say the deal is probably off. They don't care anymore. Doesn't make any sense. Things are never what they seem. They just signed a deal that was negotiated forever. Think about this for a second. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. Things are never what they seem. And I just look around and I trip. Our country right now is in the middle of the craziest election cycle in the history of everything, right? I mean, this is nuts. This is off the tracks nuts. It's so insane, you know, and if you think that we are freaking out inside of the United States right now, the rest of the world is looking at us and they are really tripping. They may look at us as money-loving imperialist, right? fake society, silicone breasts. You know, nothing's real here. We don't care about the rest of the world. Well, and we don't. If you know what I mean. I say that in jest. But, you know, that we're self-absorbed, and we are. And I say that in jest. But the rest of the world is really tripping because they already think we're nuts, right? They do. They honestly think we're nuts. There's nobody outside of the United States that thinks that we're grounded. But they look at us for stability. They do. They know that we're crazy. But they look at us for stability. And that's another example of things are never what they seem. They're just not. They look at us for their money, for international trade. The entire fiscal year of the majority of the countries of the world depend on the United States. They may hate us, but they love the money. So right now, everybody, the entire world is sitting back and waiting and not saying a thing. Why? Because things are never what they seem. Ever. Last night, Rita and I, we listened to some Lloyd Pye before bed. Nothing better than a little slice of pie to get your head straight, let me tell you. And he didn't let down. He never does. Love me some Lloyd. And Lloyd just confirmed once again that what I talk about every single night on this show is that we don't know nothing. Things are never what they seem. We don't know nothing. Nothing. We really don't. It's insane. And so it got me thinking today on the anniversary of MH370. What have we found out about MH370? Nothing. We don't know anything about MH370. And the man isn't telling us. Why? Because we can't handle the truth. Or that's what he thinks. Maybe it was some kind of time travel vortex. They ain't going to tell us. Maybe it is sitting on Diego Garcia. They ain't going to tell us. We can't handle the truth. Maybe the pilots went insane and drove the plane into the sea and they can't find it because the radar broke and the transponders broke and the Rolls-Royce can't do anything, blah, 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 and we can't handle the truth. Maybe that's it. As crazy as that sounds, the time vortex wormhole seems more plausible than that, but nonetheless, things are never what they seem. Ever. What has the man come clean about? What has the man come clean about with us? What has the man ever? I mean, so think about that for a second. When can you sit down and say the man came clean about this and told us the truth? Take out a pen and just write something down. And then after you get that, email it to me. I want to know. I don't have an example of it happening once. But what has the man come clean? Things are never what they seem. Ever. And since the man never comes clean, and it doesn't matter what country, what news outlet, what mass media, what politician, what military guy, corporate head, boss, your boss at work, whatever. What has the man ever come clean about and told the truth? Nothing, because that would make something seem like it should seem, right? But nothing ever, ever, ever is what it seems. What does the man come clean about? How about Bigfoot? We got nothing. Got nothing. Footprints all over the world. Crazy stuff. Evidence. Could be the missing link, right? Don't know. We know nothing. MH370? We know nothing. Nothing. Absolutely zilch. UFOs? Man come clean about that? Nope. Alien life? Nope. Nothing. 9/11? Are we even close to being told the truth about 9/11? No, we know nothing. Whatever the truth is, they think that we can't handle it. So, we know nothing. ISIS, nothing. We know nothing. Nothing. Absolute zilch. How about Kennedy? As crazy and classic as an example that is, we know less today about the Kennedy assassination than we did back in November 1963. How about Egypt? We know nothing. Nothing. Who built the pyramids? Nothing. How? Why? When? We know nothing. Lost history. Lost civilizations. Pick one. We know nothing. Nothing. And the man isn't going to tell us, even if he knew. How about the Bilderbergs? As public as that is, it's also so secret. And you know what? We know nothing. How about Putin? How about Putin? How about what's going on inside of Russia? How about what's going on inside of the Kremlin? Intentions about anything, the economy, war, employment, an agenda, anything. We know nothing because we can't handle the truth. North Korea, we know absolutely nothing. Nothing. Chemtrails. What do we know about chemtrails right now, today? Bona fide fact from the man, from anybody. What do we know? Let me help you out. Nothing. What do we know about the Federal Reserve? How'd you like to walk through those front doors, walk down those hallways? You can't. We know nothing. Nothing about the Federal Reserve. The Vatican. What do we know about nothing? Absolutely nothing. The missing link. The missing link. The one thing that we should know something about, we know nothing. Absolutely nada. Didn't happen that long ago. Right? You would think we know something. We know nothing. Somebody knows. They just ain't telling because we can't handle the truth. How about this? How about the IRS? How about the NSA? How about the CIA? How about the NRO? What do we really, honestly know? Nothing. We don't know how many, who, when, what, why, budgets, intentions. Are they here? Are they there? We know nothing. And you can't find out anything even if you wanted to know. Nothing. How about the obvious, right? The obvious. Let's just go there. How about the Illuminati and Freemasonry and mystery schools? Lump them all together. Just they're supposed to not be, but let's lump them all together. What do we really know? What do we actually know? We know nothing. And so you look at the world. I just gave you a list of 20, 30 things off the top of my head. I can keep going. And what do we really know about the world around us? What do we really know about today, about the elections, about Syria, about what happened in Paris, about what's going on with Russia and Crimea, the Ukraine, China, the South China Sea, North Korea? What do we really know? What do we know about Somalia? What's going on in Africa? What do we really know? Nothing. What do we know what's going on inside of our own country? Our own country. We live here. And it's nothing. We don't know anything. So, as I sit here and I drink from my Walter Lewis mug that says right on the front of it, question everything. You know what? I think I will. Always question everything. And then tonight, guess what? We have Nick Redfern on. Nick Redfern's World of Whatever to do just that. Nick does that in spades. He questions everything. And I'm going to ask him, there was one thing that he brought up last year at Contact in the Desert, and we were doing a panel. And he said something very interesting to me last year. And what that was, I'll share that with you after the break, because I'm going to go back and visit that question again with Nick, because his answer was one of the most intriguing, and I think I might have even stolen it and repeated it on this show. Nick's writing, not only at his World of Whatever, but Mysterious Universe, his writing is something that I love. And I admitted it to him last year, that there are times when I'm gearing up for a show. I'm just like, what do I want to think about tonight? What do I want to talk about? What you know what? And I go and I read me some Nick. I do. He centers me. He grounds me because he questions everything. And not only that, but he wears some of the coolest shirts in all of alternative media. And I think he's just one of those guys that I look up to and admire. So tonight we're going to do just that. We're going to question everything in Nick Redfern's World of Whatever. Earlier tonight, let me look here now, about an hour and a half ago, the moon passed in front of the sun, causing the first and only total solar eclipse of 2016. Yeah. Now, why wasn't I tripping out? Because we didn't get to see it here in the United States. The eclipse was only visible in Indonesia from the islands of Sumatra, Borneo, Sulawesi, and Halmahera. A partial eclipse was visible over the southern and eastern parts of Asia, northern and western Australia, and parts of Hawaii. But we missed it. We actually had a total lunar or solar eclipse today, and it'll be the only one in 2016. With that, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get Nick in tonight. Nick Redfern is with us tomorrow night. Don Schmidt and Tom Carey are going to be here Thursday night. It will be Jeff Harmon. He's going to be manning the phones with us for a very cool Fader night. We're going to discuss Nancy Reagan, her legacy with astrology. All right, we'll try to get some phone numbers in tonight, phone calls in tonight with Nick Redfern. It's going to be one of those nights. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Bespoke Radio for the Masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. I'll be back with Nick Redfern right after this short break. Stay right there.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Klutsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fade or Nots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Nick Redfern is with us. Very excited when Nick is on the show. This is Bespoke Radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network, KGRA, The Planet. Let's do this. Nick is here. He's in the batter's box right now. Nick works full-time as an author, a lecturer, and a journalist. He writes about a wide range of unsolved mysteries, including Bigfoot, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, alien encounters, and government conspiracies. His books include For Nobody's Eyes Only, The Monster Files, The World's Weirdest Places, The Pyramids and the Pentagon, Keep Out, The Real Men in Black, The NASA Conspiracies, Contactees, and Memoirs of a Monster Hunter. He writes for UFO Magazine and Mysterious Universe. Nick has appeared on just about every show that I love, including Fox News, History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Monster Quest, UFO Hunters, Legend Hunters, National Geographic Channel's The Truth About UFOs, The Paranatural, BBC's Out of This World, MSNBC's Countdown, and Sci-Fi Channel's Proof Positive. His two most recent books are Men in Black and the Chupacabra Road Trip. We'll be talking about that tonight for sure. I want to welcome back Mr. Nick Redfern. Nick, good evening, sir.
Hey, Jimmy. How's it going?
It's going good, but before we get started, Nick, you know I'm going to ask you, what shirt are you wearing right now?
I'm actually wearing one of my favourite old black T-shirts, which is got more holes in it than it should have. But we've all got T-shirts like that where you just like to kind of slob around in them, you know what I mean?
So it's not, you don't have Black Flag on tonight, or?
I don't know. It's just a plain black one, but it's definitely on its last legs. But I'm going to try and get another year out of it yet. So.
It's one of the things that I enjoy about you, and that you know what, I'll admit it, that I enjoy about myself, which is I like music. I love music, and it's such a big part of my life. And for me to be able to come on the show every night and talk a little music and a little entertainment and some conspiracies and a little Men in Black and some UFOs and how screwed up the world is, and I can do all of that at once, I'm a happy guy. And you do exactly the same thing. You're not concerned about what other people think. You wear your colors, and you do exactly what you want to do. Have you found your bliss?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've kind of pretty much always been like that. You know, I don't have much time for, you know, ass kissers, basically, you know. I tell it as I see it, and if people like it, fine, and if people don't like it, well, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And I think the way I kind of look at it is, not to be depressing, but we've all got one life, one life only. So you might as well enjoy it and make the most of, your 80 or 90 years or whatever, and do what you want to do on your terms. Whether it's music, book writing, or just anything in life, any aspect of life, just do what you want to do.
You know what's cool about our audience right now? Just popped up in Twitter right now. John says, I'm wearing my Black Flag, My Rules Anyway t-shirt right now. How weird.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And there you go. So, did you play, I've never asked you this, did you play an instrument, or do you play anything now or sing?
Yeah, I play guitar, and I actually been into, I sort of grew up in the punk era, when it all kicked off. I was sort of 11 and 12 when it all sort of kicked off in the late 1970s, and I just, when you reach that age, you kind of find what music you sort of like, and the first things I kind of heard were the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, and the Ramones are in my all-time sort of favorite band, and I just kind of love that sort of fast music with minimal solos, but sort of really catchy, loud, fast songs, and the image of like the motorbike jackets and the t-shirts and everything else. It was just, everything about it was perfect, and I still love punk music today, and I like a lot of other stuff as well. I mean, back then, it was exclusively sort of punk and new wave, and but bands today, I'm not sort of really into heavy metal, but I like some rock, like for example, more alternative rock, kind of Rob Zombie, Rammstein, Nine Inch Nails, that kind of thing, and also Motorhead. Unfortunately we lost Lemmy just recently, but so I kind of like more intense rock rather than what I call all this, what I consider like stupid sword and sorcery rock, like Iron Maiden and all. I can't stand like straightforward heavy metal. It's not my music at all, but sort of punk, alternative, all that kind of stuff.
I'll tell you something funny. One day, I used to, I hung out with Steve Jones quite a bit, and and one day, we're sitting and we had a moment, right? We're having a moment, and the conversation's there, and sitting in his living room, and I said, "So, Steve, did you have any idea? Be straight with me. Did you have any idea that you guys were going to change the world?" And he looked right at me and he goes, "Man, we were just trying to get some beer money."
That sounds about right.
Yeah,
actually,
right?
Funnily, I don't know if you know this, but he's just about wrapping up his memoirs. So he's got a book coming out all about his life.
I spent like a summer with him, right? Mm-hmm. And he turned out to be exactly the opposite of what I thought he was going to be. I thought he was going to be a little standoffish, a little punk attitude. You know what? He is one of the warmest, coolest, smartest, most genuine people you can ever imagine hanging. He is truly just one of the guys. Mm-hmm. And it was just so cool. I felt like I could ask him anything or do anything. There was he saw so much in his life that you can't shock him. You know what I mean? And he just kind of goes with it. And he's just a really, really cool dude. I would look forward to reading his memoirs. And
it should be a good one.
yeah. And, see if he comes clean about who really played bass in the band. But enough of that. Enough of that. Did you grow up, because you keep mentioning, that era of music, were you a northerner? Were you a Birmingham guy, or were you in London proper? What part of the country?
No, I grew up actually about 20 miles north of London. If you look on an English map, you look for a city called Lichfield, Lichfield. I lived about 15 minutes from there. But I was like I said, about 20 miles north of Birmingham. You know, Birmingham has a long history of bands like Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, several of the guys, totally different music, but several of the guys from Duran Duran were from Birmingham. You know, so it has a long history in terms of a lot of different types of music. And my mum and dad were heavily into music. They liked some of the stuff that I still listen to, you know, stuff like the Stones and all the early Phil Spector stuff, you know, like the Ronettes and the Crystals. I used to, you know, like all that kind of, like doom love song bands, you know what I mean, all those, that kind of stuff. And my mum and dad particularly liked like the Stones and Roy Orbison, and music was always playing in the house. So, that, you know, I got into it at an early age, but it was sort of listening to, you know, my parents' songs, and then, as I said, when I got to 11 and 12 and heard sort of these almighty crashing guitars and, you know, just speed, etc., I realized this is what I'd been waiting for. So.
Yeah, well, you know, I went through a really weird phase. I went through the big hair 80s thing, which I loved Van Halen, and I liked that stuff that was going on in the Sunset Strip, and I grew up with that. And then something weird happened, 1984, 85. I get my hands on Bullocks, right? And I get it, and I started playing it, and, you know, and I knew one or two of the songs, but I just wasn't a punk guy. And I listened to that record, and I realized how stupid I was, how wrong I was, and how great that record is, because it is great. It's right there with Led Zeppelin 2, Van Halen 1, Meet the Beatles, Elvis. I don't care. You know, it is that great. It was a seminal record. It changed things, and I just felt really, really bad for ignoring it for as long as I did. And it's right there. It stands on its own.
Well, one of the things that happened, I mean, I know this from sort of living through that era, there was this sort of incorrect myth that the band couldn't actually play. You know, but they were really good musicians, but they kept it minimal. You know, from their perspective, playing really good didn't mean 10-minute guitar solos. It meant you had like a blistering kind of, just like a juggernaut of chords, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And I think that kind of comes across in the music. And I mean, if you listen to them, a lot of the songs actually have, as strange as it might sound, you know, a lot of melody as well.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
choruses and sing-along, and, you know, it's not just like ranting and screaming.
No, that's what your parents would want you to think. But once you go back and listen to it, those are some of the strongest choruses and anthems and just well-crafted songs. Writing a song is difficult. Writing 10 songs like that is really hard. No, you're absolutely right. You're 100% correct on that. And before we move on to the good stuff, I got to tell you, if you listen to Lydon's PIL, the first album, which it was called cassette, right, or CD, you remember the generic label? Listen to that record. That is about as fine a songwriting as there is anywhere. And it just shows you how good he really, really was at finding melody and being original. And I'll stand by that, man. That first PIL record, probably just as strong as Nevermind as well. That's my opinion, but I'm going to stick to it.
Well, I agree with you. I think, you know, from that whole era, there was, it's like any movement, you know, there's good and bad. And, you know, but there's some classic bands sort of came out that late 70s era, both in the US and the UK. You know, I mentioned Black Flag earlier, bands like the Cramps. They're one of my favorites as well. And, you know, you got the Clash, the Buzzcocks, the Damned. The
Damned is somebody, I don't mean to cut you off, Nick, but the Damned is somebody else that just doesn't get their due. Oh.
No, you're right.
Oh, man. You know, when we get together at CITD, you and I, we're going to sit down and we're gonna knock a couple back and listen to a couple Damned records. And
well, funnily enough, about 5 or 6 years ago, I actually had an evening hanging out with Rat Scabies, the Damned's drummer, at a gig in England, and he's a really cool guy, very like Steve Jones, just laid back and happy to chat, and we just sort of hung out at in the bar and just chatted about music. So had a good time.
Did you ask him about UFOs?
Well, he's actually interested. I don't know if you know this, but he wrote a book about 4 or 5 years ago about, I don't know if you know this place in France, Rennes-le-Château. It's all connected to like the Holy Grail and things like this and hidden treasures. And he wrote a book on it, like I said, about 5 years ago. You can find it on Amazon. He actually did quite well in England. And so, he's got a personal interest in sort of mysteries like that.
Yeah, I would like to get him on the show and talk to him about that. I remember when the book came out.
Yeah.
Now, I had mentioned, I don't know if you're listening before I brought you on, but last year at Contact in the Desert, you were on my panel, and you had said something to me that stuck with me, and I don't even know if you realize it. I'm going to ask you the question again because your answer was pretty amazing, and I stole it, Nick, okay? I'm just telling you right now, I stole it, and I've used it as my own.
I'm not even sure what it is.
I'm going to remind you. I had, the question was to the panel, or actually it was to you, where are these crafts, these alien crafts, these off-world crafts coming from? And are they coming across the universe? Are they interdimensional? And your answer was you think they're coming right from inside of our own solar system. Do you remember that answer?
I don't, but I mean, I think what I do think is that regardless of whether it's interdimensional or extraterrestrial or what it is, I think it's far more likely that there's a presence. I don't mean there's sort of giant cities on Mars and Venus or anything like that, but I mean, I think we're dealing with something that has probably a permanent presence very close by. I think that makes more sense than, looking at thousands of stars in the sky and expecting multiple races to come from this place and that place and another place. And so, a lot of my views, I guess like a lot of people in the subject, your views kind of modify and change over time. And, you begin to look at things more logically and think, well, are they really zipping back and forth from sort of 10 light years away? And, on a daily basis, it kind of sort of stretches credibility a little bit unless they can sort of really do it instantaneously. So, I think there's something to be said for sort of dealing with a phenomenon that possibly even sort of coexists with us in stealth, and possibly even on the planet, sort of permanent, places where they actually perhaps never leave the Earth. They're sort of silent partners to us in some respect.
When you said that, and that was your answer, when you said that, I was watching Stanton Friedman, right? Leaning forward and listening to you, and then he kind of looked up at the sky a little bit, and he was thinking, and he kind of looked back and listened to you and raised an eyebrow, and you caused us all, because it wasn't the answer that anybody else had, not only on the panel, but I think a lot of us in general, and it was just a very interesting take. And I stole it. I stole it, man. I had to. I thought it was very insightful and one that is not considered or contemplated.
Well, one of the things that always catches my attention, and a lot of people possibly don't even think about this. If you look at a lot of the early sort of 1950s and 60s contact cases, and people would see aliens, they were sort of very comfortable. In our atmosphere, no spacesuits or anything like that. They seemed quite comfortable with the Earth's gravity, the pressure, the oxygen levels. That kind of is a little bit suspicious if they're coming from somewhere so far away, and yet they're so totally able to, to walk around comfortably on our planet. Again, that makes me wonder if, like, for example, the late Mac Tonis came up with this theory of what he called the crypto-terrestrials, like an ancient offshoot of the human race that has existed in stealth on the planet, possibly deep underground for so long, and possibly that applies to at least a percentage of the UFO phenomenon, something that literally does share the planet with us, and possibly even masquerades as extraterrestrial to hide its true origins.
Somebody just hit us with the cover of the book, Rats, Scabies, and the Holy Grail.
Yep, that's the one.
That's it. See, you got to love our audience, man. They totally get what the conversation is about. It's kind of funny because I'm looking here. You can't forget about Lux Interior. A couple of PIL comments. But see, that's what's great about this show. I'm serious. We can do all of that, and they get it. They're picking up what we're putting down. And now back to this, the idea of that, because when we look at the UFO hypothesis and you look at it in its general definition, that spacecraft are traveling these vast distances. Well, now that we know what we know today with technology in the universe, it starts to become more and more implausible. But nonetheless, the sightings are real. The sightings are genuine, and I've had my own. So the interdimensional part of it makes a lot of sense, and that's a possibility. But maybe they're just here. Maybe they're just here and they're just zipping across and visiting and leaving again. Or maybe they're here all the time. And I just find that very fascinating.
Yeah, I think, you can look at it different ways. It's like a permanent presence of extraterrestrials, or it's interdimensional, or it's like McTony said, could there be like an ancient human offshoot, like offshoot lineage, that they're responsible for some of the cases. Whichever answer it is, I still think we're dealing with something that is sort of intimately close to us in terms of proximity, whether they're zipping in and out of one reality into another or whatever. But again, one of the reasons why I guess that theory isn't necessarily so popular is because ufology is sort of ingrained with the idea that they're coming from Zeta Reticuli or they're coming from the Pleiades or whatever, because these are the names that get thrown about within ufology, and it becomes sort of an accepted belief system. And I always feel that it's kind of dangerous to get caught up in belief systems when we should actually be looking for evidence rather than just holding on to a belief system because somebody says, well, that's the answer, and well, maybe it's not the answer, maybe we should be more aware of the fact that I always tell people the U in UFO still stands for unidentified. We know there's a phenomenon, but we don't really know what its origins are or what it wants or where it's from. People tell you they've got all the answers, but if they're honest with themselves, they actually haven't.
Where did this start for you? We're going to be hitting a break here in 5 minutes. Where did all of this start? Did you have a sighting? Did you see Bigfoot off in the distance one day? What happened?
No, I actually didn't, neither. But what happened was that my dad spent several years in the British Royal Air Force. This was when back at the height of the Cold War, when the British government had the equivalent of the draft over here. In England, it used to be called National Service. But, it was cancelled like 50 years ago, something like that. But my dad worked as a radar mechanic during his time in the draft. And he was involved in several UFO incidents where UFOs were caught on radar approaching the English coastline, and this went on for 3 nights at the height of a NATO exercise called Mainbrace. And my dad was brought in to sort of check out all the radar equipment to make sure it wasn't malfunctioning and showing up like fake or spurious images on the screen. And there were no problems, and on top of that, fighter pilots were scrambled to intercept these things and reported seeing these sort of brightly lit brilliantly lit objects performing all sorts of weird maneuvers, and the pilots couldn't get close to them. Actually, they were sort of forced to return to base eventually because they were running low on fuel. This went on for 3 or 4 nights, and all of the people at the end of the experiences, from the ground crew to the pilots to the radar operators and the radar mechanics like my dad, everybody was told, you won't talk about this. This is a national security issue. And my dad didn't tell anyone until I was like 13, 14, something like that. And it sort of really got me thinking, not just because it was my own dad, but because he was trained in the military. And it got me thinking, wow, there's more to it, or there's something to it. I hadn't really given it much thought before that. So I then started reading books by people like Brad Steiger and John Keel, some of the popular sort of mid to late 70s books when they started to come out, etc. And like a lot of people, I got into it as a kid and just started reading more about it.
What did your dad, how did he feel? And did he disclose to you what he thought? Did he have a hypothesis?
Well, I mean, in one sense he didn't, which is actually to his credit, I guess, because he didn't speculate. And I mean, if you ask him today, he's still alive. If you ask him today, he will say, well, we tracked something, and whatever it was far in advance of anything that we were flying back then. Nobody, the Russians, America, Britain, nobody was flying objects that could sort of travel in excess of 1,000 miles an hour and come to a sudden halt and hover over the North Sea at a height of 30,000 feet for like 10 minutes and then suddenly shoot away when the plane started approaching them. Nobody was flying things like that. So in that sense, he accepts that there's a genuinely unknown phenomenon, but, he doesn't sort of speculate. He'll say, well, I can tell you what I saw on the screens, and I can tell you the screens weren't lying, and...
Did you try to push him? Did you try to push him a little bit on the issue?
Well, I did, but I mean, he genuinely wasn't given the full story. That's the way secrets are kept. I mean, he saw it from his perspective of looking at the radar screens, and then there was sort of, the chatter and the gossip around the base that, hey, John Smith, the pilot, chased one of these things, and, he shared a few snippets of information, but for the most part, what they were cleared to know because of their own part of the job was pretty much all they did know. So my dad only got fragments of the rest of the story, as people sort of whispered about it or whatever.
Now, we've got 2 minutes. With your travels, not only to the Mothman Festival or what have you, you're out, you're at all points in the country all of the time. Have you had an experience out there researching that you can't explain?
Oh, yeah, I've had a lot of weird experiences over the years. Not so much directly with, like, UFO sightings, but a lot of weird synchronicities. And also, when I've been on expeditions like cryptozoology expeditions, which is one of my big interests, cryptozoology, finding, like, for example, huge footprints, getting plaster casts of big footprints and hearing weird howlings and screamings in the woods, which are clearly not from regular animals. And then you kind of think to yourself, wow, it isn't now just something you're reading about in a magazine or watching on the History Channel or whatever. This is actually, you can hear something that might be within sort of a couple of 100 yards of you. And so things like that, I've experienced a lot of things like that, really, yeah.
Yeah, and what does that do to you personally when you relate the stuff that you can't answer? We'll pick this up after the break, but I guess the question is this: does it cause you to, like my little diatribe before I brought you on, about questioning everything? Because the man isn't going to come clean and tell us. Right? So you have to go out there and find out for yourself. And you have these experiences. Do you just start to look around and go, you know what? Nothing is ever what it seems. This world is nuts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, the world's surreal. And the more you look into it, the more surreal it gets. But, for me, I kind of, when I'm doing these kind of expeditions, I don't sort of get worried or frightened. For me, it's more like an adrenaline rush that pushes me on further, and I accept that reality, for me, I don't think reality as we see it is actually what it is. I think there's far more, I sometimes think we're almost like living in a real Matrix world, where we think we're all awake and we're actually not, because such strange things happen. You think just black and white reality just doesn't cut it, you know.
No, it does not. Our guest tonight is Nick Redfern. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Bespoke Radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. Tonight, it is live, Nick Redfern's World of Whatever. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back more with Nick Redfern right after this. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church. Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
Hey folks, Life Change Tea here, reminding you that colds and flus suck. Feeling lousy sucks, and allergies really can be annoying. What if you could change that? What if you could drink something that changed the sick and tired scenario? Well, you can change how you feel with a little help from Life Change Tea. Life Change Tea is a drink you make, you control, and you drink. There are 8 organic herbs that blend together and give you what you need to fight the flus and colds of this world. Less sickness is more relief. Life Change Tea can help with high blood pressure, constipation, high cholesterol, and much, much more just by drinking the tea. Read the numerous testimonies at getthetea.com. If you're tired of feeling lousy, order right now at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Or you can call us at 928-308-0408. That's 928-308-0408. If you've heard this commercial more than once and someone's trying to tell you something, it's time to get well. GetTheTea.com.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you. And your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. Yes. We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Hello, Fadernauts. Are you looking for the ultimate Bluetooth speaker system? Well, check this out. The Studio Dome surround sound system, featuring the Studio Dome 1 SD1 and the Studio Boombox SBB wireless Bluetooth speakers, is the perfect way to get surround sound without all of the cable headaches. With its own hard shell custom carrying case for taking your surround sound experience on the go. Each hard shell case comes packed with an SBB, 2 SD1s, cables, and power. It's just $99. And you use the promo code Jimmy, and you get yourself some free shipping. Once again, Studio Dome brings you the best deal on the net. Anywhere. Just go to the Studio Dome banner, jimmychurchradio.com, promo code Jimmy. Go Beckley Teppy.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern, and his world of whatever. You like that, Nick? We're calling it World of Whatever Live.
Well, that's my blog's name, so it's kind of appropriate anyway.
Yeah, it's totally awesome. Totally awesome. Now, I remember, I'm going to share with the audience really quick. When I introduced you at Contact in the Desert last year, I admitted to the crowd. I said, look, you know, when I hit that dry spot, when I need something, I go to Mysterious Universe. That's what I do. And I turned to you, and I kind of threw you under the bus a little bit, where I said, you know, I wish you wrote a little longer, because your pieces there, I get through them. They're great, but I just, you know, are you limited on how much you can write? Do you wish, or do you want to write longer?
No, I mean, there's actually no limit on the things, but sometimes, you know, sometimes I do a longer one, sort of like 1,500 words, or a two-part one, and other times I like to do, you know, sort of like something which is more like a news item, sort of 800 words or whatever. And I try and sort of mix it up, so, you know, I do sort of at least one article a day for them. One might be like a cryptozoology article, or a UFO article, or an ancient mystery, you know, or an unsolved crime, or whatever. But, you know, I try not to sort of get too stereotyped, or, you know, just comfortable, if you like. I like to sort of mix it up, and hopefully, you know, people appreciate that. But I do get what you're saying. You know, sometimes, you know, I mean, I think it sort of depends on the relevancy of the story. I mean, if it's a really intricate story, then yeah, it's going to be, you know, a long one. But sometimes I just like to do a commentary on, you know, the state of ufology or whatever. So,
well, where do you get your ideas from? Because you are. You write about anything, right? You don't focus on anything, and every day when I go and check you out, and I do just about every single day, and we'll talk about what you wrote about yesterday in just a second. But where do you get your ideas from? Do you wake up in the morning and it just comes to you, or are these things that are suggested to you?
No, I've never actually had sort of suggestions for articles, but, you know, I guess it's like you know, you get a lot of stories from people. People approach you with stories and relate their experiences, and sometimes, you know, if I say to them, is it okay to use, you know, your story, then and they say yes, then I'll perhaps turn that into an article. Or it may be, you know, I'll just be sort of surfing around, or perhaps I'll be researching a particular topic, or I've been on an expedition, or been to a conference, I'll review the conference. So it's pretty much based around, you know, sort of my activities, where it prompts, you know, stories to come to you or experiences. So, you know, that's how a lot of it happens. And, you know, I sort of mix it up with a few book reviews now and again, because I think otherwise, you know, it gets a little bit bored if it's the same thing over and over again. So I try and do perhaps a review a week, and, you know, a crypto thing a week, a UFO thing a week, you know, and so people sort of are wondering, well, what's it going to be next? And I think that's sort of a good way to do it, really.
What's your passion when it comes to alternative media? Is it cryptozoology? Is that what makes you tick?
Yeah, cryptozoology, the study of unknown animals like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, Mothman. And there's several reasons. Again, it sort of goes back to my mum and dad. When I was about 6, they took me on a week's holiday to Scotland, and we spent a day at Loch Ness. And that's when I first heard the story of the Loch Ness Monster. So that kind of got me a little bit hooked on that side of things. But one of the main reasons, it's not just sort of the fascination with cryptozoology, but I enjoy road trips. You know, I enjoy hitting the road, going on expeditions, and, you know, to faraway lands, so to speak, and sort of stalking around the woods at midnight, or, you know, out on a boat in a particular lake where there's supposedly a lake monster with your night scope equipment. So I get a rush out of doing that. I enjoy it. So just the idea of sort of jumping in the car, spinning the wheels, cranking up the music, and heading off to Lake A or Lake B, you know, in search of its resident monster. It's fun, and as long as I've got that passion for it, I'll keep doing it. So.
Well, speaking about Loch Ness and music, and did you hear about Crowley and Jimmy Page's house burning down a couple of months ago?
Oh, yeah, the Leskin house, yeah. It was like 80% destroyed, and I don't think it's really going to be rebuilt again, unfortunately. So.
Did you check it out when you were a kid?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the good things about Loch Ness. I mean, it's a long body of water. It's like 22 miles long, about a mile wide, and about 700 feet deep. So it's pretty large. But when you quickly learn the different places where they are, like Urquhart Castle, which is one of the main areas where people have seen the creatures, and interestingly enough, the waters off Urquhart Castle are actually very deep. And yeah, Boleskine House, which Aleister Crowley used to own, and he undertook all sorts of rites and rituals, orgies and black masses, you name it. And it has a lot of people have said, it has a really creepy vibe to it. And two of its previous owners, prior to when Jimmy Page owned it, two of the previous owners committed suicide. And when Crowley was there, friends and colleagues who had visited him said that the house kind of just oozed like a sense of menace. It's like you could almost taste it. So, but the weird thing about Loch Ness is a lot of paranormal stuff goes on there. There've been a lot of UFO reports, Men in Black encounters at Loch Ness, people trying to photograph the Loch Ness Monster only for their cameras to jam or the pictures to come out fogged, witch covens, ghostly stories, you name it. It's like the whole area is like saturated in weirdness.
Is that your favorite? Is that your paranormal hotspot?
I would say it probably is because, as I said, I got it first time I went there as a kid. But, I mean, there's a lot of other places as well. I mean, for example, you look at Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman was seen.
Right.
First time I went to Point Pleasant, that was cool, it was like I was a little kid again almost, and seeing the places that John Keel talked about in the Mothman prophecies. And, you've got so much weirdness there. You had the Mothman, UFOs, the story of Indrid Cold, and just weird stuff going on. And you find places like that all across the planet. It's almost like a portal opens up, just to allow a bunch of weird stuff in from somewhere else.
Well, so yesterday, your article was on Leonard Stringfield. And what was great for that for me was just one of those where I was like, you know what? This is a little bit of a refresher course. And I had nearly forgotten about it. It's not a case that's discussed, but it's certainly one of the nuttiest, craziest cases ever. With the Air Force, the military directly involved, and I don't even know if the audience knows about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, Stringfield was somebody who got into the UFO subject in the early 50s, and the reason he got involved was because he worked in Air Force intelligence in the latter stages of the Second World War and through 1946. And he focused a lot of his research up until his death in 94 on stories of crashed UFOs and dead aliens and things like that. And he wrote 7 or 8 status reports that every year or so that would reveal all the latest information he got on military people who claimed to have seen dead alien bodies stored deep underground, etc., etc. But the particular story that I talked about yesterday was a really controversial one that he got in the 1980s, reportedly from the height of the Vietnam War, when there was sort of almost like a Black Ops Delta squad type organization that was looking for the North Vietnamese troops, etc., and where they were sort of held up. And they, instead of coming across the troops, they came across this sort of landed spherical UFO and saw these sort of grey-like creatures, but taller, loading human body parts into these various bins and sealing them. I made the point that they were sort of like cosmic butchers almost, and allegedly there was like a firefight between both sides, and both kind of retreated, and everybody was sort of subjected to sort of subliminal hypnosis to try and encourage them to forget the events, and drugs were used and things like that. And I mean, it's a really controversial story. Crashed UFOs and dead aliens is controversial, but when you start talking about sort of extraterrestrial meat packers, loading body parts into bins and rolling them on board the craft
in the middle of a war, no less.
Yeah, I mean, but the interesting thing is that there are actually a lot of reports of what have become known as human mutilations, like the human equivalent of cattle mutilations. There's more than a few reports. Back in the late 1980s, Don Ecker, there used to be with UFO magazine. I think he was the editor of in fact, he was the editor, I think, of UFO magazine for quite a while. Don investigated a number of stories of bizarre human mutilations in the United States, of bodies found with organs removed, kind of like the cattle mutilations. So, there is sort of precedent for these kind of stories.
How does that see? That's the part that nobody wants to talk about when it comes to ufology, right? That there is not discussed. It's not pursued, and it's something that people just would rather choose to ignore. You know what? The cattle mutilation stuff and the horror stuff is rough enough, right? It really is. It's hard to look at the pictures, the evidence, to talk about it. And then you go to the other side where there's the possibility of this happening actually to humans. And that is the taboo subject. Nobody wants to go there.
No, you're right. And I think part of it is because, there's a significant percentage of people in ufology who dearly want to believe that the UFO phenomenon is 100% benevolent. It's all love and light. Well, it actually isn't. I mean, if you look at abductions, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, well, they're doing it for our benefit. Well, to be honest, I mean, I don't see what benefit there is in being abducted and, poked and prodded and having your memory semi-erased at least, and then thrown back, into your own environment. I mean, we hear these stories again where they say, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you or anything like that. But I've yet to see where there's actually been a benefit for the person or for us as a whole. I mean, the planet and civilization is probably in its worst state that it's been for centuries. We're sort of, we've got North Korea threatening nuclear war. We've got overpopulation, crime, gun crime and mass shootings all over the place, and, problems with the oceans and the rainforests. And, I mean, I would imagine that or at least assume that these things could help us in some respect with regard to all this, but they don't seem to be doing so. Unless we're just not seeing the big picture, and the big picture is a far more lengthy one than just sort of 20 or 30 years or whatever. But, I think there's a lot of issues in relation to the UFO subject that suggest it's very much a standoffish kind of phenomenon that's here for its own ends and its own reasons, which we probably shouldn't find surprising because, we unfortunately exploit the planet and everything on it for ourselves. And you could make an argument, why should they be any different? And that could explain some of these darker aspects that, maybe they just really don't give a damn about us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I had a little experience like 20 years ago. Something strange in my room was there. Nothing happened or anything like that, but there was a little standoff, right? Well, okay, so that was it. Lasted for about 15 minutes. But people have asked me over the years, not only people that are into that kind of therapy, but also people that have heard the story. And they go, dude, don't you want to know? Don't you want to be regressed? Don't you think something else? You know what? I'm cool with it. I don't want to know. I really, really don't want to know. Maybe nothing happened, but right now I'm cool with the experience as it went down because it was terrifying enough. But I don't want to know. It could be something really, really bad. It could be nothing at all. But I really don't want to know. And you're absolutely right. Could it all be benevolent? It's possible. It's possible. But when we walk around and you walk down your sidewalk and you go to your car, right? And you're stepping on ants, right? Are you concerned that you're stepping on ants? No, you're not. And if somebody is a million years more advanced than us, we could just be ants, to them. And that's really the truth. And you have to look at the way humans interact with our own world and how we deal with things. Well, then that is how you have to expect others to react to us.
No, I agree with you on that, because I think through a lot of pop culture and particularly movies and stuff like that, people think the aliens are either going to help us or they're going to destroy us. But I mean, you make a good point with the ants. I mean, if somebody treads on an ant, they don't necessarily think about it, but they don't actually hate ants, But it's kind of like, they don't hate the ants, but they've just killed it, but they don't hate them. And I think it's probably the same way. I don't think they're here to destroy us or they hate us, but they may not care if we're not around or we wipe ourselves out, because we're just not that important to them. And I think it's probably our ego as the human race to think, well, of course we've got to be important to them. Why? Well, because we're the human race, But there could be any number of races like us that sort of begin, flourish, thrive, and then wipe themselves out, and these entities, whatever they are just like, well, okay, there goes another one, and so they move on to somewhere else. And so I think a lot of our perceptions and ideas on extraterrestrial life and what's going on and why isn't based around on the evidence. We don't come to the conclusions based around the evidence as such. We come to conclusions based on perceptions that we often develop from like pop culture as to how Mulder and Scully handle things, or the scenario in the War of the Worlds, or at the day the Earth stood still. That kind of reflects, I think, even on ufology as to what we think's going on.
What do you think? Not only the MOD but the United States too as well? What do you think they actually know, and why is it that they just feel that we can't handle the truth?
Well, as far as what they know, where I differ to a lot of people is that I'm not entirely sure that the government of today actually knows what's going on at all. I'll explain what I mean by that. A lot of people assume that, the president, the White House, the government, the CIA, whoever, are sitting on, the Roswell files and autopsy reports going back to the 40s and all this kind of stuff. But I think if you look at the subjects and hear all the stories, there's good evidence in my mind that at some point, probably no later than the late 60s, maybe a little bit earlier, that all of the agencies we know for sure were heavily involved in the early 50s, like the FBI, the CIA, Air Force Intelligence. I think it was all sort of siphoned off to what we call like a black budget program, which essentially operates outside of the regular confines of governments, that is answerable to no one. It's like an elite secret government hidden deeply within the real government, and unless you get the invite, you don't get to see it. So I think it's kind of like with the disclosure movement. I think the fact that they're galvanized and they're enthusiastic about what they do is good, but I think they're very it's almost like a naive approach, thinking that knocking on the door of the government is going to provide answers, because I think the real answers are hidden to the extent that, ironically, like today's Air Force may actually not know what happened at Roswell, but somebody knows, and somebody's hiding it. But the people we expect to be hiding it may not be the ones who are. It could really be a group that is so incredibly buried. And when I say buried, I mean sort of metaphorically, but possibly even literally, buried underground, where all this is just hidden, kind of like, the final shots of Raiders of the Lost Ark, this huge underground or hangar or whatever, where it's all kept and studied, but the number of people in the know could be extremely small. And so the government, I think, probably may not know too much, but somebody does. And I think possibly one of the reasons why we haven't been told, it could be the revelation being that they really don't know what's going on. You know, maybe the reason for the silence is not so much what they know, but the fear of having to admit we can't control this and we don't even know what it is or where it comes from or what it wants. For a lot of people, that might actually be more frightening than if the government said, well, we got all the answers, but we just didn't want to tell you. If they actually say we've got no answers and we can't stop it,
well,
that could be worse. You know?
Totally. And for you, how old were you in 1980?
15.
Yeah, see, you and I are about the same age. So you're 15 in 1980. Rendlesham kicks off, and we don't need to discuss Rendlesham. It's been discussed enough. But for you in 1980, when Rendlesham kicked off, how did because you had an interest, how did the UK deal with that? Was it squashed or was it discussed? And did you hear those rumors?
Well, I didn't hear the rumors then because although the incident occurred in December 1980, or incidents, it actually wasn't until 1983 that the story was broken by one of the English newspapers, the News of the World. And a couple of people came forward, and this coincided with the Holt memo that Colonel Holt prepared being declassified through the Freedom of Information Act, and then it all sort of erupted. And a lot of people took the story extremely seriously, even people who didn't previously have any interest in UFOs, because there was this sort of stark, amazing memo talking about this triangular-shaped object and elevated radiation readings in this airbase on the east coast of England. You know, Britain is a small country.
Right.
You know, it's only it's less than 800 miles long, you know, and less than 300 miles wide. It's not it's smaller than the state of Texas, but it has a population of 60 million. So when something goes down in the UK, everybody hears about it, you know. And that really was a case that made people think, wow, you know, this is on our doorstep. And the Air Force is endorsing it with their documents. And so, for me, Rendlesham is on a par, in terms of its potential importance, it's on a par with, like, Roswell in the US. You know, it's sort of Britain's Roswell, not in the sense it's a crash, but in terms of the number of witnesses, credible people, and a paper trail that, to an extent at least, can be traced down.
Yeah, and I bring that up because, okay, so 1980, December 1980, you don't hear about it. Nobody does. It's squashed, right? And then 3 years later, Jenny Randall's, the book comes out. They do their investigation, the Halt memo. And you're forced into saying those words. What? This happened 3 years ago and we're just now finding out about it, and it happened right here? That's the part that I find interesting. How did that make you feel? I mean, the suppression of evidence and the government hiding something?
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, Rendlesham's a perfect case when people say, oh, well, the government can't hide secrets. Well, they did. They did quite easily and skillfully for 3 years. And the only reason the story really did take off was because, you know, a couple of people came forward under aliases, one of them being Larry Warren, who later, you know, came out publicly and wrote a book with Peter Robbins, Left at Eastgate, which is, you know, a really good book on Rendlesham. But in other words, if Larry hadn't come forward and if the memo hadn't surfaced, it's entirely possible that the story would never have surfaced at all. So, you know, secrets can be kept even in a small island nation like the UK. You know, like I said, it's 60 million people, only 800 miles long, and the landing of a UFO can be successfully hidden for 3 years. And, you know, because it's a small country, I mean, the twin bases where this happened, Bentwaters and Woodbridge, it's surrounded by little old, you know, centuries-old villages and towns that haven't been changed for years. You know, there's thousands of people live in them. And they had no inkling of it either. And they, you know, it's not like we're talking about it landing at Area 51, you know, 100 miles from Vegas in the middle of a desert. You know, you're talking about a relatively built-up but countryside type area, but, you know, where there are little towns and villages, and it didn't even reach them. So it was really well hidden.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. You know, if you ever wonder how somebody could cover something up or if that a secret can be kept, that's one of the best examples because it just happened yesterday. This isn't ancient history. Our guest tonight is Nick Redfern. Yeah, that's right. Nick's World of Whatever Live. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. More with Nick when we come back. We're going to jump into Bigfoot, and I'm going to ask Nick about the TV series The Prisoner. We'll do all of that right after this short break. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Not being able to fall asleep is so frustrating. The tossing, the turning, the adjustment of pillows and blankets. Ugh! Eventually you just decide to get up and start your day really early. It doesn't have to be this way though. Power Sleep is an all-natural non-prescription formula that will help you sleep like a baby. It contains neurotransmitter nutrients that promote the production of serotonin, which is responsible for feelings of well-being. Power Sleep is easy to digest and absorb and is made in a base of active probiotics. Don't miss another night of sleep. Order your Power Sleep at EnergyWave.com or call 800-TURTLE-5. Add Power Vites to your cart while you're browsing. Perfect for Monday mornings. They're a complete multivitamin and mineral formula that will give you the energy you need to get through your day. Nourish your immune system and feel great. Get all the info and place your order at EnergyWave.com. Enter code word SLEEP to get free shipping. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Did you ever turn to your radio for your favorite talk show to find that it's been preempted for this?
In the air to deep right center. Back goes Lewis to the wall, and it's out of here!
Or this?
And I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it.
Do you have a favorite talk radio program that's not available in your city? Just go to TalkStreamLive.com for links to the best streaming talk radio shows. At TalkStream Live, you will find live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your favorites are here. With such a large selection, you will also discover some new favorites. On the go and still want to listen? With the mobile smartphone, simply type TalkStream Live on your internet browser. Now you can take internet radio with you. You will also find hundreds of music, news, and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Nick Redfern is with us. Any questions or comments, use hashtag F2B in Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter right now. Or hashtag F2BQ. Do ants have a soul? That just came in from Eric. And you can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Nick, I brought up before the break, and I did it for a reason, The Prisoner, Patrick McGowan, one of the greatest television things ever in the history of everything. Love it. But it's also evidence of, you Brits love a really good government conspiracy thing. That's what you guys do. And The Prisoner was about all that. And then, the underground, the secrecy, the cover-up, and then you get Rendlesham, right? It's right there. The MOD and spies and the military and it's just like you guys had the opportunity to go see it's real. You know what I mean? Did you watch The Prisoner growing up, and did you enjoy it like I do?
I've got to be honest. I know I watched it because I have vague memories of it, but it would have been when I was a little kid. I've got to be honest. I haven't seen it, as a grown-up. I haven't seen it as an adult. I probably haven't watched it for 35 years, probably, I would think. So.
You know what? You should go back and just do a refresher. Just watch the entire thing front to back, because it's exactly what, I'm serious, it's exactly what Rendlesham is all about. The cover-up and the MOD and secrecy and all of that. It's really kind of funny to me where the parallels are there between the two.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do know the basics of the story, but you do find in the UK, there have been a lot of sort of really good conspiracy-based thrillers. For example, one which was turned into a movie which I didn't like was Edge of Darkness with Mel Gibson.
Right.
But if you see the original BBC miniseries, which was about 6 episodes, that's really good. It's it's like filled with paranoia, all about sort of nuclear technology in the UK and things like that. And it's assassinations and spies, but it's not done in sort of sensational James Bond style. It's more sort of dark and subversive, and it's a really good series. And if you find it, you can get. I'm sure you can get it online, but I know it's definitely on DVD. So.
And what about? I got to quiz you about a couple other things before we move on. I want to talk some Bigfoot. You have UFO, great television series. You have Space 1999. That was great. And Alternative 3. You guys are guilty of that as well. Yeah, you laugh. You guys are guilty of Alternative 3, and that certainly freaked out the entire country.
Oh, yeah, that was a big talking point, the whole Alternative 3 angle and sort of secret missions to Mars and, plans to evacuate the elite from the planet and all sorts of weird stuff. And, there's still like a subculture that focuses on on Alternative 3 to this day. There's a lot of people still following it and writing about it. And, it's a very controversial area where it has its believers and it has its sort of disbelievers as well, but it's still got the legs that it had when the story first surfaced in the late 70s.
Yeah, like I said, you guys over there, you like a really good government conspiracy. You know what I mean?
I think one of the reasons is because a lot of people in the UK are very sort of cynical about government in a good way. We don't sort of just take them at their word, and people like to demonstrate, and when the government does something we don't like, people take to the streets with placards and signs and, bring the traffic to a halt down in central London or whatever. And that's what you got to do. You got to be proactive. And so when governments in the UK tell us things, people are like, oh, yeah, okay. Sort of very cynical approach. But, I mean, that's not just cynical for being the sake of being cynical. It's because history's shown that, we've been in the UK lied to and, not told the full story of this or promised this by politicians when they're going to get elected and they don't follow through. And then we're like, well, why should we play it, the right way if you're not going to either? So.
Well, David Icke's going to be on with us next month. Oh, I just let it slip. Okay. Well, anyway, Ike is going to be back with us next month, and I really enjoy him. I think he's a genuine gentleman, and I enjoy him a lot. But the whole Queen Mother is a reptilian aspect, and the Matrix, which is it's interesting how he presents it. But England also didn't let that go and didn't really dismiss it. Is the Queen Mother a reptilian?
No, I don't think the royal family are reptilians at all. But what I think David Icke has uncovered some really good stuff that demonstrates, history isn't what it appears to be, and that, the the real sort of movers and shakers in the world, the people who really control the planet. I think that those are sort of areas that he's really sort of strongly and skillfully covered, demonstrated that sort of the elite, which aren't prime ministers and presidents and queens. They're the people you never see, but they're the ones who really rule and pull the strings. And I think he's done a very good job of sort of, bringing all that information and tying it in with sort of old families and lineages and secret societies, demonstrating sort of an ongoing manipulation of the population.
Let's talk Bigfoot. I love Ike. I could listen to Ike all day long. And actually, he's going to be here in Southern California, and Rita and I are going to be able to go and do the 12-hour marathon, man. And really looking forward to that. And I'm wondering if they actually do break for lunch, or is this really?
I would hope so.
Yeah, right. I get
or at least a bathroom break.
Yeah, right. I can't wait, man. I'm going to do it myself right here. But Bigfoot. Now, I'm going to turn the table on you a little bit on this Bigfoot thing, because I'm on the fence. I want to believe, I really do, and I think it answers a lot of questions. But if you were going to convince me that this is something that we need to seriously look at, because Nick, look, the Patterson film is real. I am convinced that what was captured on film is real. I wish ufology had a piece of film like the Patterson film for ufology, because it would be case closed. So I'm not completely shut down to it, but since the Patterson film, nothing else is, I'm not talking about film, but anything else definitive hasn't happened. So if you were going to convince Jimmy Church that Bigfoot is real, what's your best evidence? And let's start to go there.
Well, I mean, I would sort of need to preface that by saying that my views on Bigfoot, they're not certainly unique, but they are different to most people in the field, where for most people in cryptozoology, Bigfoot is the North American equivalent of like a gorilla. It's an unknown type of ape. But the fact is that, if you look at every 100 reports, there's sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 reports where the reports are really weird, where people have said they've seen Bigfoot vanish in a flash of light, or it's faded away, or it's been associated with weird lights in the sky, and all sorts of strange things like that. And, of course, Bigfoot never gets shot, it never gets killed, never dies in the woods and is found, doesn't get hit by a vehicle. Bigfoot is really the only animal, if it's an animal, on the planet that avoids detection and killing and finding 100% of the time, with a 100% success rate. And when you look at all these anomalies, I think there's something very weird about Bigfoot. So if I were to sort of say, hey Jimmy, this is what Bigfoot is and this is why I think it is, I wouldn't be making a case that it's just a North American equivalent of a gorilla or an oversized chimpanzee. I would be making a case that there is something extremely weird and, bordering on the paranormal in regards to Bigfoot. I don't believe it's just a zoological puzzle. I think it's something that, John Keel sort of talked about this, the idea that of so many of these phenomena being interconnected in some ways, and he felt that Bigfoot was like this, that it wasn't what it appeared to be, and I would sort of agree with that. I think even if it is an unknown ape, it clearly seems to have abilities that go beyond just being an animal that science hasn't found yet.
Well, what are you suggesting?
Well, I'm quite interested in the theory that has been put forward that Bigfoot could be some sort of interdimensional creature, which, the regular cryptozoologists, when I bring this up at conferences, if I had $1 for every rolling eye that I saw, I'd be a billionaire.
Right.
It's an interesting theory. There's no reason why people should report seeing Bigfoot vanishing in a flash of light or suddenly becoming invisible or fading away, but people do. It's controversial enough to say you've seen Bigfoot. There's no need for, if you wanted to hoax it, there's no reason why someone would hoax it by then making the story even more complicated by saying, it vanished, or there are all these weird balls of light flitting around it, which a lot of people have reported that phenomenon as well. So I think we could be dealing with something that has the ability to sort of flit in and out of our reality. That might explain why we get waves of sightings of Bigfoot in one area that can go on for a week or two. Then they suddenly come to an end, and then they pop up somewhere else on the other side of the country. And a friend of mine named Stan Gordon a few years ago wrote a book called Silent Invasion, all about a Bigfoot wave in Pennsylvania in the 1970s, which was dominated by Bigfoot reports that were also associated with UFOs, and people who had seen Bigfoot were visited by the Men in Black, and it was kind of like the equivalent of the Mothman prophecies, but substituting Mothman with Bigfoot. But the experiences are very similar. So I think Bigfoot's sort of far more Fortean. It's far more weird than a zoological puzzle.
What do you think about the Patterson film?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I sort of swing back and forth on it. Now, I know you fully believe in it. There are some people who fully disbelieve in it. The film's interesting. There's certain characteristics when it walks, that suggest that it isn't a man. I mean, one of the little-known things that outside of cryptozoology a lot of people might not know is that Roger Patterson, who filmed the footage, he put out a book not long before that, and the cover actually shows a female Bigfoot with breasts, and that's what we see in the film. Now, people have said, well, you wouldn't fake a Bigfoot movie, and show the creature with breasts, but that's what it shows. However, is it just coincidence that Patterson, who shot the film of this big-breasted Bigfoot, is it only coincidence that his book cover actually showed a female Bigfoot with breasts on the cover specifically before he shot the film? Some people have said that's coincidence, other people have said that's just too much of a coincidence, So I'm open-minded. I'm not a debunker, I'm not a skeptic, I'm not a full unbeliever. I'm very open-minded on the film.
Well, my thing is with the film is I just believe my eyes. And when we see stuff that isn't real, we immediately just go into that, okay, well, come on, that's crap. Okay, and and we know it when we see it. I don't get that vibe with the Patterson film. I know what Planet of the Apes looked like, right, in 1970, and it didn't look like the Patterson film. No, I know what the apes looked like. Look what Kubrick did, right, in 2001. Spent all of that money, got the very best of the best, and got the best actors to play those parts. You know what? If there's a weak part of 2001, it's those stupid fake apes at the beginning, because that's what they look like. That's not what you get with the Patterson film. That's my point. You look at it, and it doesn't hit you as being fake at all. It just doesn't. And we have...
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, and that... go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one of the important things is, people have said, it's just a guy in a monkey suit. But it actually, even if it is a monkey suit, it fits so tightly and perfectly. It's not just like where it looks like a pair of pants and a shirt just hanging, slackly off the guy's shoulders. It fits perfectly. And you've got the issue of the face. It doesn't look like a plastic mask, like in Planet of the Apes or something like that. It actually looks, when you see the close-up, it looks like a face, looking at you. It doesn't look like just a couple of eyes peeking through a mask. So what I would say is that even if it's a fake, and I'm not saying it is, but even if it is, it's far and beyond what anybody was sort of portraying on screen. And the amount of work that would have to have gone in to making a suit that not only fits perfectly, but you actually see like muscle movements when the light shines on it, in the same way that if you filmed a person, and you would see muscle movements in the shadows, that kind of thing. So, whatever the film is, it's extremely skillful. And, one of the big things in its favor, of course, is that Roger Patterson wasn't a rich guy, and to have somebody put something like that together, I would imagine, would cost an awful lot of money. And for that reason alone, we've got to sort of figure out what would be the reason for somebody faking that and then not getting the credit for it or the money for it. Because Patterson wasn't in a position at all to pay anybody, for doing something like that. So, there are a lot of issues that swing back towards the idea of it being completely real.
Yeah, Hollywood tried, it still does, tries to pull that off, and they've never done it, man. Not even close. Not even. Yeah. And as great as Kubrick was, and think about that, he couldn't pull it off. But yet, this Patterson film has stood the test of time. My eyes, when I look at it, what I have to go with, Nick, I have to go with my gut. That's all. That's all. When you're seeing something fake. You go and you look at the Billy Meyer, UFO flying around the tree. You look at that and you laugh, right? You just laugh. You go, okay, that's just stupid. And when something is fake. That Patterson film, man, you look at that, and it just doesn't hit you that way. You can't tear that apart. And here we are. What is this now, 50 years later?
Yeah.
And it's still riding right there. So now I wanted to ask you, you said that you've gone out and found footprints and made plaster casts. Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I go on an expedition, it's not really sort of at random. It's sort of dictated by if there's been reports and things like that. And here in Texas, where I live just outside of Dallas. I'm about 20 minutes from downtown Dallas. I mean, a lot of people, even in the U.S., I've come to learn, don't realize that East Texas is like massively forested, because it borders on towards Louisiana, and so you've got sort of the start of the swampy areas and things like that. And the entire sort of eastern portion of Texas, going down vertically and horizontally, is just endless forest. And there are numerous reports of Bigfoot, and particularly closer towards the Louisiana border. And I've been out to some of these locations, one a few years ago when there was a spate of reports, and actually got some prints out there, which, I've made casts of. And, and to find things like that in the middle of the woods, sort of maybe a mile into the woods where, if a hoax is going to pull something like this off, they're going to do it in an area where they can pretty much guarantee that people are going to find it. The only people who go looking deep in the woods are the Bigfoot hunters or the Bigfoot seekers. So for me to come across, prints, and, I always sort of make sure I've got sort of like forensic stuff, to gather any evidence. To find, I won't say I stumble on it on every occasion. I don't. I think it's actually just been twice in dozens of, times of going out. And to find something like that, is for me, is evidence of something. And I think this is what we need to do. We need to get out and look for these things, because the internet is a great resource tool for information, but you're not literally going to find Bigfoot on the internet. You're going to find information about Bigfoot. And so I think there's still no excuse for, in any aspect of the paranormal, there's no excuse for not having field work and getting out there and looking for things and staking out the woods, or, like I said earlier, with lake monsters, sort of scouting around on the lake for a week if you can. That's how we get answers. I mean, people often say to me, oh, Bigfoot couldn't be out there because we'd have found it. I say, well, have you ever been 30 miles into the Pacific Northwest forests? Well, no. Well, then how do you know what's out there?
Right. Did you, I totally agree with that. Did you compare your cast with, like, Jeffrey Meldrum's?
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of the ones, well, not personally I haven't, but I mean, I know enough about when you get a cast, what to look for. I mean, for example, on the print itself, when you cast it, if you look at the base of it, we often find what are called dermal ridges, which are, in simple terms, they're like the fingerprints of the feet. If you pick your foot up and turn it around and have a look at it, everybody's feet have lines on them, and they're all different. They're unique to a person in the same way that fingerprints are. And I actually got one print which actually shows dermal ridges. Now, if somebody has faked that, they've gone to an extreme extent, and also having deep knowledge of how to make the dermal ridges look like real dermal ridges, and then hope that somebody's actually going to stumble on it, 3 miles into the Texas woods, which to go to all that trouble and not even be sure that it's ever going to be found in the first place. That's where I I'd say I draw the line with hoaxing, because we know there have been hoaxed footprints, but I think it's less likely to be a hoax. And
how big? How big was it? How many inches?
Well, I mean, I could actually, if I'd have known, I could have sent you a photograph because I've got one. But I would say it's about 13 inches, something like that.
Holy crap! So pretty good size.
I mean, you can find a lot of. There aren't many researchers who haven't got at least sort of one or two, or some of them maybe copies from other people, etc. But I mean, they've been found everywhere. Sort of hundreds and hundreds of prints on some occasion. Where again, if it was a hoax, it was sort of a extremely elaborate one. And of course, in a lot of these cases, nobody comes forward afterwards to say, we made the tracks. There have been one or two, but not many. But you would imagine if they were fakers, I mean, they would come forward. I mean, it's not a crime. It's not a criminal thing to fake Bigfoot prints, so there's no real reason for the people not to come forward and say, gotcha, but they don't.
Well, I had a friend. What part of Texas was this in?
Oh, this was over in an area called the Big Thicket. The Big Thicket's like a huge area of forest just outside of the city of Houston. What's interesting is that if you go back to the
I gotta stop you right there. Check this out. I'm going to trip you out. You know where Carlsbad is?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Not that far. You remember the floods that happened there last year, right? All the rain.
Yeah.
Well, I've got footage here that was sent to me from, I can't say who yet. We're still getting to the bottom of the footage. But it looks strange. And what it is, it's a road in Carlsbad, all wide open, no structures or anything out there. It's just wide open wetlands. But the road, which is obviously wide, it's a dirt road. And you can see the two people that are filming it walking down the road. And they see up in front of them on the road what looks like a Bigfoot. About, I'm going to say, a quarter mile away in front of them. But it's walking away from them, Nick. And they're trying to catch up. And they're filming. Now, you can see the width of the road, right? And up ahead, the size of this thing, looking at the road, this thing up in front has got to be 8 feet tall. It's all black. At one point, it stops walking and turns and looks, and there's nothing. It's entirely black. In other words, the hands are black, the feet are black, the face is black. It is a black figure, and it is crazy. And it's about. Got about 3 minutes of this on film. It's pretty crazy. Not too far from where you got those footprints.
Huh.
Yeah. I'll see if I can get some authorization for you to see this. But it's a pretty incredible video, and I've got a few people looking at it and doing some analysis on it, and I've blown it up, and I've got frames of it. It's pretty disturbing is the only way that I can describe it. I don't know what I'm looking at. Is it if it's human, which is fine, it doesn't matter. If it's human, then the face is black, the hands are black, it's wearing black shoes, black everything. Because it does stop at one point and stand sideways and looks back, and they're yelling at him, hey, and they're trying to run and catch up, and this thing just turns around and continues to walk away. And if it's a human and you're out there and there's a couple of people yelling at you, well, aren't you going to stop and talk to them, right? But that doesn't happen. This guy continues to walk up the middle of the street, and they can't catch him. And he's walking, and these people are running. And it's trippy, man. It's a trippy video. All right, let's take a break. We're up against a break. Did I just make you raise an eyebrow, Nick?
Yeah, no, I've not heard about that one at all.
Yeah, you haven't, because I'm the only one with the video. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight is Nick Redfern. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal God, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
If your home has hard water and it's leaving white spots, then it's likely that limescale is clogging your pipes. Limescale can cost hundreds of dollars a year in wasted energy and early appliance breakdown. HydroCare systems available at Wave Home Solutions prevent and remove limescale with just a simple filter change every 3 years. There are no salts, chemicals, or magnetic coils. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, just go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
If you're a talk radio fan, AccessRadio.net lets you listen to the best talk shows anytime and from anywhere. Works on your mobile or landline phone, and there's no cost if you have unlimited minutes. No need to use your data. Find your favorite talk show listen lines and discover new ones. Now you can listen on your schedule. Go to AccessRadio.net. That's AccessRadio.net. Save your favorite listen lines today.
Hi, I'm Richard Dolan. When I'm not hosting my radio program, The Richard Dolan Show on KGRA, or writing new books on UFOs, I run a publishing company. I'm proud to say that Richard Dolan Press has published some of the most fascinating books available on UFOs and related subjects. They include Dr. Bruce Maccabee's classic analysis of the UFO cover-up, David Marler's breakthrough book on triangular UFOs, Dr. Richard Sauter's unique work on underground bases, and other classics by Grant Cameron, Chase Kletsky, and Dr. Bob Wood. Not to mention intriguing works by Eve Lorgan and Laurie MacDonald that deal with truly bizarre phenomena. I'm proud to publish such high quality and original works, and there are several amazing books about to be released over the next few months. Go to richarddolanpress.com to learn more.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Yeah, right. Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern. Where else can you get the Sex Pistols? We didn't talk about Colin and DRI. We probably should have. Black Flag, UFOs, Men in Black, and a little Sasquatch thrown in all on one show. You just can't. You got to be here hanging out with Nick and myself. Nick, Men in Black, I want to dive there a little bit. I do want to talk about your book, The Chupacabra Road Trip. But before we do that, do you want to take a few phone calls? Should we open up the phone lines?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's do it. 323-8. I needed Nick's permission. 323-825-5045. Yeah, we didn't talk about Colin, man, and DRI. Love that guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Love that guy. Now, the reason why I want to bring up Men in Black is because you happen to mention that Men in Black have been tied to Bigfoot sightings, and I find that interesting. Obviously, we have the connections with Men in Black after UFO sightings and abductions and experiences, and they've shown up there too as well. But Men in Black, are they, first off, are they men? Okay, are they men? In that, they could not be human at all. And what is your in your research? What is your connection with that? And why would they be tied into Bigfoot unless Bigfoot is possibly interdimensional, like you're saying? And Bigfoot has been connected to UFO sightings as well. I find it more than coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people's sort of perceptions on what the Men in Black look like and who they are pretty much come from Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, from the movies. People have this idea of them working for some sort of super secret government agency. But, I mean, I've written 3 books on the Men in Black, and the new one now just called Men in Black. And there's no doubt in my mind that whatever the Men in Black are, they don't work for the NSA or the CIA or whoever. Typically, they're sort of described as being only about 5 feet tall. They're very pale. They wear these large wraparound sunglasses that hide, but don't hide well enough, these sort of large bulging eyes, and they wear the old-style fedora hats. And they typically only sort of surface at night, and they're very creepy. They actually come across, the real Men in Black come across far less like the MIB movies and far more like H.P. Lovecraft meets Bram Stoker. That's what they're like. And people report poltergeist activity in the home after the Men in Black have left, or strange odors like sulfur and brimstone, things like that. So that they do have a lot of paranormal overtones attached to them. And they've, as I said, they've silenced people to UFOs, to Bigfoot. There's stories of going back 400 or 500 years of alchemists being visited by mysterious men in the dead of night dressed in black cloaks, kind of like early Men in Black prototype, Men in Black type reports. So the whole phenomenon is very weird. It's far more like an old-style horror movie than it is the X-Files.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Nick Redfern. Who's calling?
This is Dino. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Nick. You're one of the top 5. How you doing? I saw you at Contact in the Desert, and I've listened to you elsewhere, but I think Jimmy's interview with you is the best. But I think from what I gather, tell me if I'm wrong, you have not had a lot of direct experience with these things, but you write great books, and like me, you research a lot. And I can say personally that I know of, I've never seen some of these things, but they fascinate me. Is there anything you can tell us about a personal, direct experience you've had with any of the subjects that you cover?
Oh, yeah. I mean, excuse me. One classic example would be, I mentioned earlier in the show when I had a lot of weird synchronicities, and I never ignore synchronicities, and I often find when I'm digging into something and looking for answers that a synchronicity will suddenly occur where it'll actually put me on the sort of the right track for, something that I'm actually looking for. And I think it demonstrates that it kind of, you put the thought out, the phenomenon somehow picks up on it and sometimes sends something back, as strange as that sounds. So I've experienced things like that. I guess some of them more, the weirder ones, when I've been particularly to Puerto Rico looking for the Chupacabra on expeditions there, and again come across, ranchers and farmers where they've said, hey, my animals have been attacked, by these creatures. And I've been out there and found, just like goats and chickens strewn around the floor with puncture wounds on the necks, and just lying there, not touched other than the neck wound. And the rancher saying, I was standing in front of the rancher and he's saying, this thing was like 5 feet tall with this row of spikes down its head and neck. And, it was attacking his animals in the middle of the night. When you find yourself in the middle of sort of the El Yunque rainforest in Puerto Rico getting stories like this, you really do kind of look around, to see what's sort of lurking in the woods or whatever. So, but I've never sort of had that defining experience where I could honestly say, I've got weird dreams where I think I've been on a UFO. not gone to that point. But, I feel, that, like, as I've always said, the most important people in the subject are the witnesses. Without them, we've got nothing to go on. So I'm always sort of, appreciative of people who share their experiences, because without them, like I said, we've got nothing. And so I feel my role is more to share the information and get the theories and the insights out, and to do so by, with the help of the witnesses.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And if I could ask one more question closer to home, have you experienced anything about construction of the crop graphics around England? I know they're around the world, but have you seen any, or have you been around when they've been formed?
Oh, yeah. I mean, living back in England in the 90s, when the whole thing sort of kicked off in the early 90s, I used to go down to the south of England every summer for a week or two, and check out all the new formations. And a lot of them occur in the county of Wiltshire, which is the same county where you can find Stonehenge. It's a very ancient county with a lot of history attached to it. And when you actually go in these formations and you stand inside them, you realize just how big they are. And when you realize how intricate they are as well, and you find that, a lot of these fields in these little villages and towns, they haven't changed for centuries. And by 9 o'clock at night, everywhere is pitch black. And then you find the next morning, in pitch black darkness, there's like a 200-foot long, mathematically, geometrically correct formation in the field. Then you really begin to realize that something is going on that, is just downright bizarre. So, to stand in one of these things is kind of, it's sort of, it's surreal, because like I said, you just don't realize the size of them just by looking at them, like an aerial photograph in a book or whatever.
Yeah, that's.
So what do you feel they are? I guess is what I wanted to say. You've seen them.
Well, Well, there's different theories, and they could all have a bit of merit to them. I mean, for example, you have the idea that they're made by UFOs. One of the interesting theories, as quite a few supporters, is that the Gaia theory, which is G-A-I-A, the idea that the Earth itself is some sort of living entity, and that it creates these formations as a warning when we start to create havoc on the planet. It's kind of like we're the fleas infesting the dog, and it tries to swipe the fleas off. Well, the idea that the Gaia theory is that the Earth is like a spiritual entity and can manifest in different ways, on the planet's surface itself. And one of the interesting things that a lot of people don't know about, people talk about crop circle hoaxes. This is actually the subject of a new article of The Mysterious Universe in a day or two. A lot of people talk about crop circle hoaxes, but if you speak to some of the people who admittedly have made crop circles, they actually don't consider themselves hoaxers. They view what they do as like a landscape art, as they call it. But more than a few crop circle makers have said they felt privately that something was channeling into their mind the formations that whatever it is or was, wanted making. It was as if their mind had been taken over by something that was using them as like a vessel to create crop circles. So that gets into like really controversial areas where there could be a human component being controlled by some unknown external component as well.
Well, thank you very much. We enjoy listening to you for the next hour. Okay.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dino. Check this out, Nick. This is where I have a really big problem with the crop circle skeptics, right, and debunkers. There's one thing that nobody discusses or talks about, and it's this. You go on somebody's farm here in the United States, a couple of teenagers, you go and you want to goof around on somebody's farm and start whacking down his money, right, his crops, you're going to get shot. The police are going to be there in no time flat, and if something's bad is really going to happen. All you have to do is set foot on his property. You're going to get caught. I can't imagine being able to go on somebody's property and doing something like that all night long and not getting caught. That is the thing. And some of these are so large and so elaborate. Some of them are fake. Some of them are hoaxes. I get it. You look at it and you can tell the ones that are just done by doofuses. You can see that. But the ones, these large, intricate, geometric, amazing, impressive designs, and you look at those, that took somebody, whoever, a long time to do. And you didn't get caught. There are thousands of them, and nobody, I have yet to see somebody get caught. That's the thing. You know, where is the farmer with a couple of kids or 10 kids, you know, tied up, right? And right there. And I caught these guys on my property last night making this elaborate, beautiful crop circle, you know, and arrested. Where is that? It's not a couple of old guys with a couple of boards out in the middle of a field. That's not what's going on here. You would be caught.
No, I mean, you're right. There's no doubt that there's a genuine phenomenon, and I do think there's a phenomenon that has sort of an external component to it. You know, the big question is, what is it? I mean, some people have suggested that it's actually UFOs landing and flattening the core. That's not what's going on. If it's like something, you know, coming from the sky, then it would have to be something that has an ability to sort of lay down the crops. And, of course, one of the interesting things that a lot of people sometimes forget is that in many crop circles, people report seeing these weird balls of light flying over them. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not UFOs. They're sort of anywhere from the size of like a tennis ball to a basketball,
right,
hovering over the fields and the formations. And a lot of researchers think that there's obviously connection. Now, whether they're like a residual energy from the formation itself, or whether they, you know, have a role in creating them. These are issues that crop circle researchers have been, you know, debating on for years. But I mean, but no, you're right. You know, there are plenty of debunkers and skeptics out there, but you know, there are so many anomalies associated with the crop circles that, you know, there's clearly a mystery to it. So.
Yeah, if you want a good ass kicking here in the United States, go out on a farmer's property and start destroying it.
Yeah. I guess it's a little bit different in England, because England's sort of a bit more sleepy, and, you know, there's no guns, and you know, it's you often find if the farmers find a crop circle on their property, you know, they'll have somebody at the end of the field or whatever charging everybody the equivalent like $1 to come in and see it, and just, you know, they say, well, stay on the tram lines, don't crush the corn down, and just go in and get your pictures and leave. You know,
yeah, that's true. But you don't necessarily need a gun in England, you know, but you do have a cricket bat, right?
Well, that's true. That could cause a lot of damage.
Yeah. I'm being serious. Let's go back to the phones. Well, I just hung up on somebody. Sorry about that. Call back, and I just I clicked on the wrong button. But I'm serious about that. I can't imagine.
Oh yeah, no. A lot of the farmers do get really angry because, you know, it is their livelihood, and you know, they don't want people trampling through the fields. You know, the ones they actually concerned about, because a lot of people don't realise that the corn, when it's laid down so softly that it actually isn't splintered and snapped. So it actually keeps growing, but it grows horizontally, and the farmer can actually sort of still reap the corn. The people that the farmers get really mad about are actually not so much the people who make them, although they're obviously a part of the problem as they see it as well. But it's the hundreds of people that trample around the field, stamping on the good corn and then, you know, destroying it. So they're more concerned about, in the summer, you know, hordes of people descending on the areas and just stomping through, you know, the fields in combat boots and whatever, and destroying everything. And so,
I'll remember your advice when I'm out there making a crop circle. I'll tell the farmer before I get shot, dude, it'll grow back. It'll grow back. Nick Redfern says, "Hi, you're live.
All right.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Nick Redfern. Who's calling?"
Hello, Nick. How you doing? It's Jose from Florida.
Hey, Jose.
Hey, Jose. How are you, brother?
I'm good. Hey, I have a couple questions. I'm from Puerto Rico, and I got a couple questions in regards to the Chupacabra.
Okay.
In your investigations in the Puerto Rico subject, did the Chupacabra ever match what's compared to as to what is found in Texas, like a dog-like type creature?
No,
did you ever come across?
Yeah, that's a good question because, this thing that in the U.S. that's become known as a Chupacabra is actually completely different to the Puerto Rican one. Most people who I spoke to on all the various expeditions I've been on to Puerto Rico, which has covered 2004 to 2014, most people describe it as having a body not unlike a chimpanzee in size. Imagine like a hairless chimpanzee. That's how a lot of them sort of describe it, but with a kind of like a row of spikes on its head and neck. And in some cases, people have described it as having bat-like wings. And I've uncovered a lot of stories like that from the El Yunque rainforest, and also a number of stories from Mocha as well, where people described seeing things on Puerto Rico like this. And a lot of ranchers in some of the little villages and towns in the vicinity of El Yunque, and also a lot of reports, sort of very stealthy attacks on farm animals in the middle of the night.
Right. Yes, my mother's friend actually saw one, apparently, and it was like on her clothesline, like standing on the clothesline, and she said it was some kind of weird creature like that as well. Anyways, another question: Did you ever run across reports that were reported before '95? I asked because my neighbor's chickens were taken down by a Chupacabra, and I want to say that was like in '94. And we remember talking about the subject, saying, "No, okay, that wasn't Chupacabra." I had to bury the chickens, but it was funny because it almost seems like it started in '95 according to everybody, but I remember it was happening before '95. I don't think we reported it back then.
Well, actually, that's another good question, because for most people, the phenomenon did begin in '95. That's when you had this sort of the wave of sightings and animal attacks, etc. But, I mentioned just about Mocha. Well, if you Google Mocha vampire, you'll find stories actually going back to 1975 of animal attacks that, with hindsight, actually sound like the creature was the Chupacabra, and the attack, the means by which the attacks occurred was exactly the same. But it wasn't called the Chupacabra in '75. It's referred to as the Mocha vampire. And you can find some of those stories, those original 1975 stories, online. And I also found a case from 1965 where a cow had been found mutilated and allegedly drained of blood right on the fringes of the Arecibo radio telescope, which is on Puerto Rico, which is involved in the SETI program, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So it's kind of interesting that this mutilated, dead, blood-drained cow was actually found on the fringes of Puerto Rico's most famous telescope. So that was the mid-'60s. So I actually wonder if the phenomenon of the Chupacabra is much older than most people think. But, we didn't have the internet back then, and so perhaps a lot of the stories in the little towns didn't leave the little town. The person never talked about it.
Yes. I was going to mention that because, as you know, you've traveled to Puerto Rico. They're very religious Catholic people down there. And my grandfather had a story where he actually saw something on his backyard and I'm going to say it was actually in the 70s. I'm from Vega Baja, which is the north side of Puerto Rico. It's 25 minutes from Arecibo, actually, to the east. And I remember him, my mother, they didn't tell the story, but my mother told me a story that basically he witnessed something in the backyard. And describing it now, and according to my mother, they're like, it actually looks like what the Chupacabra. That's what he described back then. But
how tall, Jose? How tall were these? Did your family, describe how big they were?
I did not get what size they were, but what my grandfather told my family, and then I got this from my mother, was that basically it was a creature. Basically, what they were when it happened in '95, when my mother saw it in the news, saying that's what my grandfather described back then. You know, it was really funny. But what he said, there's a demon in the backyard. Everybody go inside, lock yourselves up, and they all started praying. That's what happened. But,
did he say demon because it was, reptile-like? Was it, the big eyes standing upright kind of thing?
Well, yes. I am assuming that's why they called it that. And again, these are religious people. That's when they see something they don't understand and it looks creepy, they just call it a demon. You know? I'm talking. These are people from we're from rural places back then, especially.
Yeah, this is.
So I find it interesting that that's how, as time has progressed, we've learned to identify it differently. At least that's the way I see it,
Yeah.
I was wondering, that's why I wanted to ask Nick if he had come across any reports that were prior to 95.
Well, I can put, Nick, I know Jose. I can put you two in touch with each other. I think Nick would actually like to get a hold of this information, no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay, I can go into more detail. If you want, we can go into more detail about the actual story and everything and how it went down.
You never told me about you never told me about this, Jose. Fascinating. So thank you so much. Let me grab one more phone call before we start to wrap this up. Thank you, Jose.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Okay.
You too. All right. Let's. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Nick Redfern. Who's calling?
Hey, Jimmy. It's Rich. How are you?
Hi, Rich. Say hi to Nick Redfern.
Hey, Nick. How are you tonight?
Hey, Rich. I'm good, thanks.
Good. Jimmy, I just want to tell you guys you're doing a great show tonight, and that you do an excellent job at it every night, I'll tell you.
Well, we do what we can, but it's not me. It's guests like Nick and phone calls like yours. Anybody could do it. But thank you anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you anyway. Hey, Rich, did you have a question for Nick really quick?
I did. It has to do with Scott Ramsey and Aztec, New Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Did you actually get to visit the site in Hart Canyon?
Yeah, I've been out to Hart Canyon, several times.
Uh-huh. And were you able to actually, you've met Scott directly, haven't you?
Yeah, I've met Scott a few times. So people might not know, Scott Ramsey's someone who's done a lot of extensive research into a UFO crash in the North New Mexico town of Aztec, which reportedly occurred in early 1948. It's kind of like Roswell's little brother almost, It was written about going back to the 40s, and over the years a number of books have been written on the case, the most recent one being the one that Scott and his wife Suzanne wrote. And it's a really interesting book. It sort of delves into the story, and they found a bunch of Freedom of Information documents on the case, and it's an interesting one with a very long story attached to it. And so when I sort of look into things like this, I always like to get out to the site so you can kind of get some sort of idea of where it all went down.
Oh, absolutely. I got to see his video, and that was very well done. The whole story about the crash and the retrieval.
I haven't actually seen that one.
Yeah, I've seen pieces of it, but we can put up the link right now in Twitter. But it's pretty good, and it's an interesting case. You're absolutely right, Rich.
Yeah. I didn't realize that Nick had the extensive amount of publishing that he's done either. I have to start picking up some of his stuff because it looks like it's pretty interesting as well.
I don't know how Nick cranks it out, but he does.
Really?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the phone call, Rich.
Well, thank you. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Hey, Nick, we're against a break. You want to hang on for 10 minutes of overtime?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's do it. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern. I do actually want to talk about his book, Chupacabra Road Trip. It's a fascinating subject to me. We'll do all of that when we come back, and we'll see if we can take a couple more phone calls. We'll squeeze those in as well. It's Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Nick Redfern. We'll be back right after this short. Oops, stay with us.
Here, and you are listening to my boy Jimmy Church on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Angioprim can clean blocked arteries and improve blood flow in all parts of your body. Angioprim is liquid oral chelation. It's not new science. 50 years of research has gone into chelation, and now there's Angioprim. Easy, simple, liquid oral chelation. You take it with juice before breakfast and forget about it. Angioprim works fast, unlike old-fashioned chelation that takes hours. The first thing Angioprim users say is they have more energy, more strength, more endurance. Increased circulation and blood flow will make all your body parts work better. Log on now at angioprim.com to get more information on how you can get started and start feeling better and doing more. Lots more. Talk to a trained Angioprim consultant or go to angioprim.com for help. Call Angioprim toll-free at 877-882-7221. That's Angioprim at 877-882-7221. Get the facts about Angioprim. Begin living the life you want, doing the things you used to do again with Angioprim.
Hello, Fadernauts. Are you looking for the ultimate Bluetooth speaker system? Well, check this out. The Studio Dome surround sound system, featuring the Studio Dome 1 SD1 and the Studio Boombox SBB wireless Bluetooth speakers, is the perfect way to get surround sound without all of the cable headaches. With its own hard shell custom carrying case for taking your surround sound experience on the go. Each hard shell case comes packed with an SBB, 2 SD1s, cables, and power. It's just $99, and you use the promo code Jimmy, and you get yourself some free shipping. Once again, Studio Dome brings you the best deal on the net. Anywhere. Just go to the Studio Dome banner, JimmyChurchRadio.com, promo code Jimmy. Go Beckley Teppy.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back, Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. On the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet, you can follow me right now on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Hashtag F2BQ, questions for myself or Nick. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Nick, I wanted to, and thank you for hanging on for a few more minutes. And
sure.
And, we have, with you, we have another 3 hours of programming we could do. There's way too much to talk about. But when it comes to Chupacabra Road Trip, and you start to look at not only the United States and Puerto Rico, but it's the Dominican Republic, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, Brazil, Mexico. What is it that everybody is seeing? It goes beyond, imagination or suggestion. What is it that they are seeing?
Well, they're clearly experiencing something, and something unknown that is attacking farm animals and, and killing them and getting away with it as well. What I've found is that I think in some cases that we're definitely dealing with unknown animals, but in some cases it may not be the same one. I think what's happened is that so the term Chupacabra has become sort of so iconic and part of pop culture that any, attacks on animals, particularly in Central America, South America, wherever, people instantly say it's the Chupacabra. But, it could be we're dealing in different parts of the world with different unknown animals. There's this hairless dog-like one that surfaced in Texas predominantly, which has become known as Texas Chupacabra, but it's completely different in its appearance to, the Puerto Rican one. But, there's no doubt, though, that in the last decade or so, that Central America and South America has been sort of really hit hard by weird animal mutilations, and that they very much parallel what's going on, or what was going on to a greater degree on Puerto Rico in the 90s. And, of course, that brings a big question forward, how, if they were predominantly on the island of Puerto Rico, how did they get off the island, to South America? And so then you have sort of all theories for that as well. And, one of the interesting ones is the idea of a connection to the UFO phenomenon, because when you had the initial Chupacabra waves in the 90s, there were a lot of UFO sightings all across Puerto Rico. There hasn't been an expedition I've been on to Puerto Rico. There hasn't been one where I haven't got a bunch of UFO reports as well, and very often in pretty much the same locations where the Chupacabra was seen. So, that's given rise to the idea of, is it some sort of extraterrestrial creature? Has it been sort of released into the wild, and could that explain why it's been seen in other parts of the world as well?
Is there, when you do your investigations and you're talking to witnesses, is there, I don't want to know, well, you can tell me if you want, but is there something that you find consistent with everybody else that you don't share, and it's down your checklist and you're going, okay, all right, now this is legit? Is there something that is consistent with all of the witnesses?
Yeah, there actually is, and there's one thing, and it's a really weird thing. That is that, if you imagine that, you had a little farm and perhaps you kept half a dozen goats and a dozen chickens, and they're right outside your back door to your backyard. If they were attacked by a Chupacabra in the middle of the night, you would imagine if you only slept sort of 20 feet away from where those cages are, you would instantly wake up at 3 in the morning if you heard the chickens screaming the house down and the goats doing exactly the same. But the weird thing is, and this is why, I take, one of the reasons I take these stories seriously, one of the little known things that often crops up when people are telling me the stories is that they slept through the entire attack. And the only reason they found, or they knew that their animals were dead, was when they got up in the next morning and saw, the goats with like puncture wounds on the neck, and the same for the chickens, which arguably should have been, making ear-splitting noises. And so when people tell me repeatedly there was no sound, that actually parallels a lot of other cases. And there are one or two witnesses who said that they actually saw a Chupacabra sort of creeping up on a goat or a chicken, and it was like it was hypnotized. It was as if the Chupacabra had the ability to essentially freeze it, to allow it to attack the animal, to where the animal wouldn't scream out or cry or whatever. And it would just move it, almost like, the situation where a snake, kind of gets its prey in its view, and the animal just freezes. But a lot of people have sort of presented it more from a paranormal perspective, where the Chupacabra perhaps has some sort of mind control over the animals it wants to attack, and the animal freezes, and that's why there's no crying out in the night, that the people don't find out till the next morning, which doesn't make any sense when there's like 30 animals in the pen or whatever.
That's interesting, because the animals are there to protect themselves too. It's called survival. Yeah. And they're going to try to band together and scare away whatever it is, if a wolf, a Chupacabra, a human. They're going to make noise and try to protect themselves. It's, survival. And if that doesn't happen, you're absolutely right. A farmer is listening for that all the time. A mountain lion, a bobcat, a wolf, coming in to steal. That's what they do, right? They're dealing with this kind of these predators every single day, and they're used to listening for those noises. And if it doesn't happen, that's got to freak a farmer out. It's freaking me out.
Well, it is weird, and as you know, back to your question about sort of a checklist of things. When I hear that, that's one of the reasons why I'll buy into that story, because I've heard that so many times, which is a really strange thing. And of course, one of the important things to remember is on Puerto Rico, there aren't any large indigenous wild animals. There's nothing like mountain lions, bobcats, nothing at all. That the only big animals on Puerto Rico are like pigs, goats, cows, that kind of thing. There's no, despite having sort of a really cool-looking jungle-like rainforest environment, there aren't the big animals that you would expect to find, in South America or the African jungles. It's very different, just very small animals.
Before I let you go, I want to talk about Mothman. I know that you were just out at the festival. I saw your postings, and I'm fully jealous. One day I'll make it out there. Something happened out there, and it was a big tragedy. I mean, that part of it we can never forget. It is a fantastical story. It's an amazing story. John Keel presents it correctly, but something happened out there, and it was real. What's the bottom line with Mothman for you?
Well, the bottom line for me is that Mothman is a real entity, but I don't think it's like an unknown animal. I think it's some sort of paranormal creature. Now, of course, the big question is how we define what the paranormal is. It's like a catch-all term for a bunch of stuff. But I mean, I think the fact that Mothman was seen from sort of late '66 and culminated towards the end of '67 when you had the collapse of the Silver Bridge in town. The Silver Bridge used to cover, or I should just say, the Point Pleasant is on the edge of the Ohio River. So one side you've got Point Pleasant in West Virginia, the other side of the river is Ohio, and the Silver Bridge spanned the two states. And in December '67, we had the Silver Bridge collapse and dozens of people drowned, when their cars and trucks, whatever, just plunged into the river late at night, and they were unfortunately drowned, dozens of them. Now, for me, I find it difficult, to the point of being pretty much impossible, to suggest there's not a connection with all the weirdness that was going down. And it all came to a head with the collapse of the bridge and the people who died. Now, you have some people, some researchers who think that Mothman was the cause of all this. Then you have others like Andy Colvin who suggest that maybe Mothman is more of like a warning entity that surfaces when disasters are about to happen, that he has like a precognition and warns people, but in a strange way. Now, of course, the term Mothman, it kind of sounds almost comic book-like, like a superhero or something, but the reality was much different. It was sort of a very sinister, shadowy, glowing-eyed thing that would typically mainly be seen at night and with these shadowy dark wings. And so, again, it had sort of like a gothic kind of atmosphere to it rather than, just sort of like something from some Japanese monster movie. It wasn't like that.
Right.
So I think, we were dealing with something paranormal, and some sort of Grim Reaper type scenario almost, and a very sinister story as well.
Has there been a credible sighting since the tragedy?
Well, people report seeing sort of unknown winged humanoid type creatures all the time. I actually get a lot of reports from Texas. Now, although I personally haven't got any from Point Pleasant, when I went there in 2014, I did hear from a few people that Mothman or something like it is actually still seen, but most of the people are quite reluctant to talk about it because they just don't want to get caught up in it all, and people descending on them and knocking on the front doors. But I was told that reports do still happen, but it's And you can understand it. Perhaps people they like the festival, but they also like the privacy as well. You know, they just don't want to get pulled into it all, so they just don't talk about them that much.
I want to thank you for coming on. You know what? I just watched the Mothman Prophecies like 3 weeks ago, and what's strange about the movie is that it's scary. You know, there's an element about it. This whole entity thing. You know, that's what's scary for me. And I thought the movie really, honestly, was not that bad. It presented the how do I want to say this? The alternative view of it without making it sensational. The movie's very dark. And it
is, and I'm glad they kind of did it like that rather than turn it into some, film where Mothman kills a bunch of kids in the woods. Or
yes.
whatever,
Yeah.
And, those terrible films on a certain channel that we see all the time.
Yes.
But yeah, I think they've made a good sort of job of picking up on the sort of the sinister atmosphere and the vibe of menace that hung over the town throughout that entire period. They captured that well, and I think to their credit, by not really showing the Mothman clearly, but showing it in shadows and fleeting glimpses, that kind of added a bit more of a powerful aspect to it than seeing some special effect type monster,
Yeah, because that's what people saw, and turning it into some CGI slasher film, starring Paris Hilton, that's not what it was. It was very dark, and it was very emotional, and it was quite scary. So what's next for you? Are you working on a book now? Well, you're always working on a book. What's the next one?
I'm always working on a book. Yeah, I've actually got one coming out within the next month, and I'll make sure the publishers send it to. It's like a follow-on from the Men in Black book, and it's called Women in Black, and it's all about the little-known phenomenon of people who've had paranormal experiences and been visited by women in black. Rather than men in black.
I had a woman in black here at the house twice. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You never heard me talk about it? Oh, yeah. It was pretty weird.
I have to send you that one.
Yeah, pretty weird. Weird. And I'll tell you about it off the air. I'll tell you some more details. Cool. But so that comes out next month?
Yeah, it should be out in roughly about a month, 5 weeks. And then later in the year, I've got one called Nessie, which is about the Loch Ness Monster, but it focuses on all the paranormal stuff I was talking about earlier, like Crowley's house, Boleskine house, and the witch covens. It's sort of it's a study of all the supernatural stuff at Loch Ness, as well as the Loch Ness Monster, of course, but it sort of presents the story as like a paranormal hotspot type story.
Now you've got a full summer here, just like we do. You're going to be Paranormal Unity Fest March 19th, Aurora Conference April 17th. You're going to be in Erie, Pennsylvania for that UFO conference April 30th. Paradigm Symposium May 12th. Contact in the Desert, of course, June 3rd. UFO Truth Magazine Conference September 10th. Oh, you're going to be in Big Bear for that UFO conference in August, and then back at the Mothman Festival September 17th. Do you miss a conference? You don't, do you?
Well, I mean, I like going to conferences, and I like, hanging out with people and, giving the lectures. And I like the social side of conferences as well, the whole girl in every port, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do too. You're absolutely right.
And so I enjoy the social side. I enjoy interacting with the people and hanging out. And, for me, I never understand it when you go to a conference and the speakers, some of the ego-driven ones, oh, don't talk to me, I'm an author, that kind of thing. And, they go into the hotel room and just shut the door. I don't get that. I like to sort of hang out with everybody and we all have a good time. And you learn something as well, So.
Have you seen the picture of there's a few of them, but there's a picture of you and I at Contact in the Desert with me standing behind you. Have you seen that picture?
I think so. Is it where I'm sat down at the table or something?
Yeah, and both of us are looking off into the distance.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, somebody made a joke what we were looking at or something.
Yeah. It's a great
picture.
picture.
Posted a picture or something. That was right.
Yeah. But I look like a frigging cop, right? I look like the man. You look like a rock and roller, but we both got the shades on and we're both looking off into the distance. And it's the contrast between the two of us, and it's pretty cool. I'll have it sent to you. Actually, you know who took that picture was the guy Jose that called in earlier. That's who took that picture.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's our photographer out there. And so there you go. Thank you so much, Nick. Wonderful conversation. And we'll see you at Contact in the Desert, and then we'll see you at UFOs Within Reach up in Big Bear in August. Thank you so much, my brother.
All right, well, thanks for having me on, Jimmy. I had a good time. Thanks a lot.
Always. Thank you so much. Nick Redfern, everybody. I love having shows like that. Thank you so much, Nick. And again, you've got to go, of course, Unexplained Mysteries, and go or Mysterious Universe, Unexplained Mysteries, Mysterious Universe, but go to his blog, which is World of, and actually, do we have it up? Do we actually have it up? I don't even know. Do we have, I'm flicking over here. Do we have Nick's blog up? Have we posted that? Or is it over on the website? Somebody help me out here. I want that up right now. World of Whatever, Blogspot. Get that up right now. You've got to go and check it out. It's one of the best blogs, and I go there every single day. All right? There you go. Thank you so much, Nick. Let me get to a couple of things that I wanted to touch upon before I get out of here tonight. First off, and this is crazy, but right now, if you're a fan of single malt Scotch, right now we're in trouble. The global boom in whiskey consumption has triggered a shortage of aged Scotch, with distilleries scrambling to meet demand. The shortage of old and rare single malt has already started, and it's going to get much, much worse. Whiskey's continued popularity here in the United States, sales have tripled from 2002 to 2015. Global exports jumped 159% between 2004 and 2014, and 20% of all Scotch exports now go to Asia. They're all translating into an ongoing production shortage, and the prices have jumped and skyrocketed. Now, the good side, if you manufacture Scotch, you're getting rich. The bad side is there is a genuine Scotch shortage. Part of it is because an American whiskey overproduction after 1945 led to many distilleries closing due to an excess supply all the way through the end of the 1980s. The very distilleries that right now could be filling store shelves with 30-year-old vintages today. That's right. Yeah. We're going to be out of Scotch. I'm not a Scotch guy. If this was vodka, we would have an issue. FBI agents involved in the shooting death of Lavoy Finicum are under investigation for not disclosing their shots fired. This is according to statements from an Oregon sheriff in a press conference earlier today. Finicum was shot dead by authorities while reportedly resisting arrest during a traffic stop. We've all seen the video. Footage released of Finicum's death appears to show that the Arizona rancher got out of his vehicle with his hands up and then reaching for something at his side twice. Authorities shot and killed Finicum, and they later found a loaded handgun in his pocket. The Oregon State Police fired the shots that killed the rancher. This is according to the Malheur District Attorney. None of the shots fired by the FBI struck Finicum. It's just that they haven't said who fired what. I'm talking about the FBI. Very interesting. Now, to the big news. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said that the country has miniaturized nuclear warheads to be mounted on ballistic missiles. This is according to the KCNA news agency, the North Korean news agency. Now, check this out. The nuclear warheads have been standardized to fit for ballistic missiles by miniaturizing them. They're quoting Kim as saying, as he inspected the work of nuclear workers, adding that this can be called true nuclear deterrent, end quote. The comments were Kim's first direct mention of the claim previously made repeatedly in the country's state media to have successfully miniaturized nuclear warheads to be mounted on ballistic missiles, which is widely questioned by everybody, including myself. Kim also inspected the nuclear warheads designed for thermonuclear reactions, according to the news agency, referring to the hydrogen bomb that the country claimed to have tested back in January. Now, the sanctions coming down on North Korea right now. Check this out. They can't, all boats, all planes, all anything leaving or on the seas or flying around right now, the world, everything is to be searched. No exports are allowed to leave the country now. That's it. That nothing is for sale. All airplane fuel is now sanctioned. And that's it. No fuel to be sold to North Korea by anybody. They've completely shut down and cut off the country to the world. The United States, Russia, and China. And Russia and China have always been reluctant to come down with sanctions against North Korea. They signed off on this. North Korea is cut off. It's a crazy situation right now. I'm not too sure what to believe. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, today test-fired several ballistic missiles, challenging a United Nations resolution and drawing the threat of diplomatic response from the United States. Now, 2 months ago, Washington imposed sanctions against businesses and individuals linked to Iran's missile program over a test of the medium-range Emad missile that they carried out back in October 2015. A UN resolution calls on Iran not to test any missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. Well, Iran on Tuesday, today, again threatened to walk away from the nuclear agreement reached last year with all of the global powers, hours after the country breached international agreements by test-firing the ballistic missiles. All of this comes a day after the international community's nuclear watchdog organization disclosed that it is prohibited by the nuclear agreement from publicly reporting on any potential violations by Iran. Let me say this again. They are prohibited to publicly report on any violations. Iranian leaders now say that they are poised to walk away from the deal if the United States and other global powers fail to advance the Islamic Republic's national interests. It didn't take long, did it? I said it at the opening of the show. Things are never, ever, ever what they seem. I want to thank Nick Redfern for coming on tonight. Tomorrow night, we have right here Don Schmidt, Tom Carey. Their new book is Children of Roswell. Last year, I talked to Don and Tom all summer long last year. One of the things that I had said to them is that we are very close to losing any direct contact to any witnesses or anything else, any family members, anybody in the military that is directly connected to Roswell. Okay, there will be a time when all of them leave us. I think it's very important that we document and get everything done now. Well, that's what this new book does. It does exactly that. Children of Roswell. We're going to address all of that tomorrow night with Don Schmidt and Tom Carey. It's going to be a great show. Do not miss it. Thank you, Nick Redfern. Always a great conversation. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Kamarian. Shows produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, Mark Dunbar, Jonas. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar, Fady Bidale. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication is KGRA The Planet. Tomorrow night, Don Schmidt, Tom Carey. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2016 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I want everybody to be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.